So the thing is as well with a show like this is like it has to, especially when you have a very loyal fan base, you got to serve that. And I think I don't care about a show ending. I care about a show ending right. And properly, and we tie up loose ends, and the fans are satisfied. And I think they did a great job of it, and those loose ends are tied up, and it also leaves a few questions, but not too many. It's just right.
Can you give a message to fans to comfort them once they finish that last episode?
Just let it out.
Yeah.
Weep. Wail. Scream.
Dude, what message do you guys have for fans after they finish this last episode?
Life is a very strange thing. And what makes it colorful and beautiful is getting to spend that time with people that you love.
Yeah, nothing lasts in life, and everything ends. So use that to not take it for granted and be there, whilst you're here.
The plot of the Umbrella Academy is horrendous most of the time, so I thought I'd make a video covering it. If you want some additional context on the characters, you can check out my previous video in this series. There's not going to be a play-by-play of every single thing that happens over the course of the show, and I will not be taking into consideration the contents of the comics due to how much the story deviates from the source material. I'm only going to highlight specific events that happen in the show that I have issues with. I'll try my best to provide the necessary context for these events before delving into my complaints so that it doesn't seem too confusing. With that out of the way, let's jump right into this. The basic premise of the show, according to Pogo, is that on the 12th hour of the first day of October 1989, 43 women around the world gave birth, which is unusual because none of these women had been pregnant when the day first began. Following this incident, Sir Reginald Hargreaves, an eccentric billionaire and adventurer, sought to locate and adopt as many of these women's children as he possibly could. He was able to obtain 7 of these unique children. These children are later revealed to each possess special abilities. Reginald trained them in the use of their powers and molded them into a superhero team which he named the Umbrella Academy. They were introduced to the Umbrellas as adults, and at that time, one of the members of the Umbrella Academy is missing, another is dead, and the rest of them are scattered across the country and beyond. But when Reginald Hargreaves is publicly announced to be dead, his funeral is able to reunite the members of the Umbrella Academy, and we're able to learn more about what caused them to grow apart as a family in such a short period of time. We get the first example of what it was like fighting crime as children in the Umbrella Academy through a flashback in the middle of the first episode. A news reporter claims that a group of heavily armed men stormed a bank and took an unknown number of hostages. As the men are robbing the bank, a group of children show up and use unique superpowers to stop the bank robbers. After this, Reginald introduces the children to the world as the Umbrella Academy. I only have 2 minor questions about this incident. First of all, why doesn't the bald robber just shoot any of the kids when he gets the chance to? He's seen their powers at this point, and he tries to shoot 5 when he appears behind him, so he clearly has no qualms about hurting kids, especially if they're trying to harm him. Also, why are the police just continuing to stand outside after seeing a man fly to the window of the bank? At the end of the first episode, the missing sibling, 5, is at a diner, and 5 armed men show up to try and capture him, but due to his quick reflexes, teleportation powers, and experience, he's able to kill all the men, and afterwards remove the tracker in his arm that the men used to find him. Why didn't 5 remove the tracker in his arm the moment he got back home? You might say that he didn't know it was there, and he only knew about it once he picked up the tracking device and saw it, but the tracking device only seems to show the general direction of the tracker, like left or right, or whether you're farther or closer to it by beeping louder. It doesn't really show where the tracker is specifically in a person's body, judging from the fact that he specifically cuts it out of his right forearm. He either knew it was there the whole time, or he just found out about it, in which case, how did he figure out where it was in his body? After the armed men failed to take down 5, the Commission, the organization that 5 used to work for, decides to send 2 individuals known as Hazel and Cha-Cha to take him down. Both 5 and the Handler at different points claim that Hazel and Cha-Cha are the 2 best assassins that the Commission has after 5.
2 masked intruders attacked the academy last night.
Hazel and Cha-Cha. Well, the best of the best. Except for me, of course.
Well, you certainly put us through the ringer, outsmarting 2 of our so-called best temporal assassins.
Despite this, Hazel and Cha-Cha are repeatedly shown to use the most inefficient methods possible in their efforts to kill 5. They are so bad at their jobs that it honestly makes me question both 5 and the Handler's integrity, as well as the hiring practices of the Commission. I'll explain how Hazel and Cha-Cha go about killing 5 so you can understand my gripes with them as assassins. When Hazel and Cha-Cha are able to locate 5 for the first time at a mall, they decide the best way to kill him would be to put on masks and charge at him from a distance with a machine gun and a shotgun. At this point in time, they knew that he could teleport.
Time travel's a bitch.
Especially without a briefcase.
What if the kid is number 5?
It's sort of hard to wrap your head around.
And they knew his history as the best temporal assassin in the Commission's history. If the two of them really are the second best, then they should have known that the best way to go after someone with his abilities would be to either engage them from a distance using a sniper rifle not to avoid detection, so maybe waiting for him to get out of the mall, or to covertly follow him inside the mall and stage a sneak attack on him after getting as close as possible in order to get a shot off before he's able to see you and teleport away. Instead of going with either of those plans, why did they decide to basically announce themselves from a distance before firing and give him a chance to see them and react? Later on, after finding out about Five's Umbrella Academy tattoo, Hazel and Cha-Cha used that information to track down the home of the Umbrella Academy, where they presume Five might be hiding. Once they get there, they engage their single shared brain cell and enact the stupidest plan they could possibly think of. Instead of maybe staking out the area from a safe distance for a couple of hours, maybe monitoring the in and out movements of the various members of the family in order to find a time where the house might be empty so that they could enter, and try to get the general layout in order to properly plan a later attack, or even discussing whether the family members of the guy with superpowers might also have some superpowers that might need to be neutralized. They decide that the best plan would be to barge into the house the moment that they get there, while once again carrying a machine gun and a shotgun while wearing masks and no body armor, as they go room to room, gunning down anyone that comes in their way until they're able to find Five, the guy with teleportation powers. This is where my suspension of disbelief comes to die. You're telling me that the second best temporal assassins of the Commission, the first two people from the Commission that was sent to deal with their most dangerous assassin after he killed 5 armed men, the two people that have already tried and failed to kill said assassin by trying to gun him down in the sloppiest way possible, would get another opportunity to kill that assassin and still decide that the best way to accomplish that would be to execute a larger, sloppier, and more dangerous version of their last plan. But this time, in a house they don't know the layout of, with more people, all of whom are unaccounted for, without knowing Five's exact location, and more so, without even knowing if he's currently in the house at the moment. Maybe I could buy this from Hazel. Maybe. Given his willingness to fraternize with people on the job, and the fact that he doesn't remember the commission manual.
Remember Section 76 Sub A of the training manual?
I barely remember what we had for breakfast at this point.
But Cha-Cha presents herself as ruthless and efficient. She remembers specific sections of the commission training manual, which enables her to figure out a more efficient way to torture Klaus to get the information she wants.
Torturing works best when you know who you're torturing. Hand me his coat.
Be careful with that. It's my asthma medication.
Yeah, now we're getting somewhere.
No, no. Klaus, be strong.
This could all be yours for the low, low price of telling us everything.
And she's willing to personally torture an innocent man to find out more information about Five. I just don't believe she'd make these kind of mistakes. There are too many contradictions here. Either the second best temporal assassins of the Commission are extremely incompetent at their jobs, which just raise more questions about the efficiency of the organization that has been able to function this long with such terrible employees, or Hazel and Cha-Cha don't actually want to kill Five and making the stupidest decisions possible to ensure that outcome. Earlier, Hazel and Cha-Cha did get a message from the Bureau stating that their payment was cut by 7% due to the delay in killing Five.
7% reduction in payment due to job delay, further reduction every 24 hours until job completion.
So you can try to make the argument that they are rushing in order to avoid further pay cuts, which is why they're making so many mistakes. But the problem is, rushing has very little to do with the mistakes that they make. Choosing to use a sniper rifle or stealthily approaching Five at the mall would have been quicker and more efficient than loudly rushing in with guns and taking a couple of hours to come up with a plan before charging into the Umbrella Mansion with guns like lunatics may not have guaranteed them killing Five, but it certainly would have improved their odds of doing so. Additionally, none of these obvious alternative plans would have cost them any payments since they all could have been done in a couple of hours. Either way you look at it.
It's just lazy writing.
Also,
Who the hell are these people?
I don't know. What the hell is wrong with that guy?
He's a freak like his brother.
Everyone else in that house. They should have warned us this was an atypical assignment.
why didn't the Commission tell Hazel and Cha-Cha about Five's family members having superpowers before sending them? Again, they're trying to kill the most dangerous assassin in their history. Why the heck are the members of the Commission this incompetent? Granted, Hazel and Cha-Cha should have been able to figure that out by themselves with the most minimal amount of research. Some bare bones planning, or even just some slight guesswork like, hey, we're chasing a guy that has powers. Isn't there a chance that the people he's related to might also have powers? The incompetence continues when they capture Klaus and torture him to find out more information about Five. During their torture, they accidentally eat a drugged chocolate bar from Klaus's jacket, and after Klaus tells them that Five is looking for the owner of an eye, the two of them go burn down the eye manufacturing facility and have dinner afterwards.
You idiot! You didn't put the do not disturb sign on the door.
Oh my God, he's still here.
They left their victim at a hotel in a closet, tied to a chair with blood all over his body. At a hotel! Additionally, they just left their time-traveling briefcase in the vent, and Hazel apparently forgot to put the do not disturb sign on the door so that no one would enter. These have got to be the stupidest people who have ever worked for the commission. No, they're just stupid people in general. And it's made even worse by Five's confirmation that Hazel and Cha-Cha are indeed the second best the commission has to offer.
Hazel and Cha-Cha. Well, the best of the best. Except for me, of course.
Well, you certainly put us through the ringer, outsmarting two of our so-called best temporal assassins.
Yup, these two are the second best the commission has to offer. One person who fraternizes on the job, let a wife and child escape during two of their previous missions.
So grateful to you, Hazel, for having spared his wife.
You told me you shot the wife in the alley, and now I'm hearing that you spared her?
I was bored. I thought I'd give her a head start, make it more exciting.
Wait, so the kid in Tokyo, did he really get lost? Oh, Jesus, Hazel.
Can't even remember their own rule book, and another who presents herself as efficient but can't be bothered to think of a better plan to kill the greatest assassin in the commission's history than various variations of let's charge in with guns and shoot the boy. Maybe that'll work the third time we try it. Eventually, the Hazel and Cha-Cha team begins to crumble when Hazel falls in love with an older lady called Agnes, and Cha-Cha finds out that he wants to quit his job at the commission to spend his life with her. When Cha-Cha tries to kill Hazel, Hazel ties her up and says,
We're good at what we do. We can kill anyone.
He then says,
Cha-Cha, I know this will be hard for you to understand, but I want out. I'm done. When I got the order to kill you, I knew I couldn't do this anymore. I'd appreciate it if you would accept my wishes and we could go on our own separate ways.
Cha-Cha, of course, doesn't agree to his offer and threatens to torture and kill both him and his girlfriend if he doesn't kill her.
We get to visit exotic places, meet new people, and then kill them. We got it made, asshole. Shoot me. Because if you leave this room and I'm still alive, I'm coming after you and your ugly slut. I'm just gonna kill you. First, I'm gonna kill her. In front of you, so you can feel every ounce of her pain.
After considering it for a few seconds, Hazel opts not to kill her and leaves. First of all, what? Your current mission has consisted of you two failing to achieve your one objective by making the most boneheaded decisions possible. You most certainly cannot kill anyone. Furthermore, why does Hazel choose not to kill Cha-Cha? He gains back some common sense later and goes back to kill her. But what is he thinking in this moment? Any semblance of a partnership they once had is shredded at this point, and she openly says she will find and torture him and his lover the next time she finds them. Does he think he can just escape the commission? They monitor all of time and can find him wherever and whenever he chooses to hide by tracking the briefcases. His plan to escape with Agnes is stupid, but we'll get to that later. After they are split, Hazel and Cha-Cha are brought back together by the handler, and even she points out how incompetent they are.
Kill a tow truck driver, a cleaning lady, and a cop. Burn down 2 buildings and bring unwanted attention on yourselves and the commission. 5 is still alive, on the loose, and trying to stop the apocalypse. You both are no match for a litter of emotionally stunted siblings.
However, even after breaking down all the reasons why Hazel and Cha-Cha are so incompetent at their jobs, the handler still chooses to use them for yet another job, protecting Vanya to ensure the coming apocalypse happens.
I'm giving you a new assignment, one that's not open to interpretation or discussion. Protect Vanya Hargreaves at all costs.
Why doesn't she just get an army of temporal assassins to protect Vanya? An actual army, not those gas mask wearing dweebs that she hired. Why not use those time-stopping powers to prevent anyone from getting to her? How about doing literally anything else besides hiring the people who have failed at everything they've tried to do since they got here to do yet another job? Possibly the most important job they've ever been offered. Hazel, of course, decided to forego the handler's deal and instead backstab both her and Cha-Cha. He shows up at the hotel and shoots the handler in the head. Why didn't she just use her time-stopping ability instead of stalling? Why didn't she stash his girlfriend somewhere secret to avoid something like this? Why is everyone at the commission so bad at their damn jobs? Hazel eventually escapes the apocalypse with Agnes by using a briefcase he stole from the handler after shooting her, and Cha-Cha ends up burning alive in the flames of the apocalypse. In the next season, we learn that Hazel managed to spend a good 20 years with Agnes before she died of cancer. Hazel is then shot dead by the next rotation of incompetent commission buffoons. You remember that one time it was clarified that the commission could track any unauthorized use of their briefcases?
The planets in a row.
Violation code 6874A, unauthorized round-trip travel to 1968. Explanation required.
Well, how the heck did Hazel manage to go 20 years without being found by an organization that monitors all of time while using a briefcase they can always locate? I hope you understand now why I despise the entirety of the Hazel and Chacha subplot. They're just too ineffective at the one task they're sent out to do in the most stupid ways, so I find it impossible to ever take them seriously as a threat. In the beginning of the second episode, we find out why Five went missing. When he was 13 years old, he used his time travel ability to jump forward in time before he was ready, and he ended up getting trapped in a post-apocalyptic world 8 days from when he arrives in 2019. In that world, he finds an eyeball in Luther's hand and takes it. Luther is surrounded by his dead siblings, and Five takes this, plus the eye, to mean that his siblings must have been gathered together to stop whoever causes the end of the world, and that person is presumably the owner of the eye.
I found all of you. Your bodies.
We died.
Horribly. And you were together, trying to stop whoever it was that ends the world.
How do you know that?
This was clutched in your dead hand when I found you. Must have ripped it out of their head right before you went down.
Whose head?
Like I said, I don't know.
The thing is, this makes very little sense. Why does Five assume that the eyeball that he finds Luther holding must be from the person who ends the world, or that it has anything to do with being the cause of the apocalypse, or that his siblings were involved in stopping that apocalypse? There are no signs that the site of his siblings' death is the epicenter of the destruction, like shockwave lines moving outwards, or newspaper reports, or anything like that. And his siblings aren't even wearing any superhero uniforms. The only way you can try to justify it is by saying that maybe at the time Five jumped into the future and got trapped there, he left the family while it was still a superhero team, so he finds their lifeless bodies altogether. He assumes that they must have come together as a superhero team as adults to try and stop the threat that ends the world. The problem is, all that is nonsense because they could be together at the time of their death for 70 different reasons. A birthday, a funeral, a family meeting, an intervention, etc. And the eye in Luther's hand could just be from a random bad guy they were trying to stop at the time, or from somebody that blew up in front of him, or even from an investigation he was carrying out that had nothing to do with the apocalypse. Who knows? There's literally no evidence pointing to the fact that his siblings have anything to do with the end of the world. Five just makes that assumption for some reason, even though he ought to be way more intelligent than that. He definitely didn't get any information about the apocalypse from the commission because when he comes back to 2019, he's still clueless about the eye. Why is he so certain that it's incredibly significant to the apocalypse when there could be a million other reasons as to why Luther was holding it at the time of his death? Okay, I see. If you look really closely at the back of the eye, you'll see an inscription written in ancient Hebrew that clearly says, "Plot device, please look into this." I know it sounds tedious, but I just find it really convenient that he ends up being somewhat right about the eye's connection to the apocalypse, given how much vague assumption is involved in his deductions. In the second episode of the first season, we learn that Diego is involved with a detective named Patch, who's investigating the murder of the men that killed Five at the diner. Diego interferes with the investigation in an effort to help, but after he shows up with a fake badge and a police radio at the crime scene, Patch tells him that she'll make him do jail time if he interferes with another investigation.
The next time you interfere in one of my investigations, you so much as breathe on one of my witnesses, I'll charge you with obstruction of justice. You will do jail time.
What you do out there is a fantasy. Recess is over. It's grown-up time.
However, in literally the next episode, when Diego shows up again at the mall crime scene and starts touching the bullet casings left behind after Hazel and Chacha's assault on Five, Patch doesn't seem to care at all, in spite of her previous warning. In fact, she's playful with him for some reason.
Coming from the guy dressed in spandex?
It's not spandex, it's leather. You used to like it a lot, if I recall.
God, please unremember that.
Etched into the databank, Eudora.
Diego doesn't even offer any new information in this scene. Everything he says here is stuff that she had already figured out at that point.
Let me save you some time running ballistics. These 9mm haven't been manufactured since
1963. Odd, I know. Ishmael's towing.
The driver.
Found him hanging from the ceiling.
The guy's kid. In the donut shop.
I've got units tracking the extended family in case anyone goes after him.
Alright, well, this place must have surveillance footage.
No, it doesn't exist.
If she really doesn't want him to get in her way, then why doesn't she just provide a picture of Diego to everyone at the police department and tell them not to let him enter any crime scenes in the future? Also, why does the reaction to him messing around her crime scenes completely change from
I'll charge you with obstruction of justice. You will do jail time.
to
If you really give a shit and you've got any fresh ideas, I'm all ears.
Despite nothing having changed between then and now, and him still not showing any use he has to the investigation.
In a span of 24 hours, I've had attacks in 3 different places across town. Whatever this is, they're not slowing down. So if you really give a shit, I'm all ears.
It's a problem that persists with the subsequent episode, and she tells him everything about her case when she asks,
How's all that paperwork coming along?
I've got 2 guys in children's masks, rare bullet casings, a random fingerprint, and I just learned that the tow truck driver from the donut shop didn't have any family. Kids are only possible witness, and he's a complete mystery.
She moves on from, if you interfere with my investigation again, I will arrest you, to, here's all the relevant details I've gathered so far from my most recent investigation. Let's discuss, without any explanation as to why. Diego has provided 0 useful information to help with the investigation at this point, so why is she suddenly divulging the details of her investigation to him? Is she taking a page out of Hazel and Chacha's handbook on how to be terrible at your job, or did they learn it from her? She literally says,
Diego, you need to let me handle this. You're not equipped to...
if you want that, then why the heck are you telling him everything about your investigation? Stop giving him intel, for goodness sakes. In the entire course of her investigation, there's only one instance where her communication with Diego regarding this matter is warranted. It's when she finds Klaus and calls Diego to inform him of the situation.
I'm looking for Diego Hargreaves. Not here. Tell him Detective Eudora Patch called. I think I found his brother. I could use some backup.
All right, lady. Tell him know you called.
It makes complete sense in this case because it's something to do with his brother. He has the abilities to deal with the situation, and calling out the cops are just taking too long because by the time they got a warrant, Hazel and Chacha might have escaped. Or worse, they might have harmed someone. After Pat rescues Klaus, why does he try to escape through the vents instead of going through the open door when there's no gunshots being fired? Oh, it's so the writers could find a way for Klaus to get the briefcase and go on his one-year adventure. The way Chacha manages to kill Patch is weird. She kinda just teleports behind her. Seriously, when Patch is outside the hotel room, they show that Hazel and Chacha are still in the bathroom talking to each other, and Patch has a clear line of sight across the entire space outside her door. So, unless there was a secret door somewhere, there's no way Chacha could have left the room without Patch seeing her. But somehow, when Patch enters the room, Chacha is magically absent before she reappears behind Patch and shoots her. Oh, also, do you know that the real reason that Diego cries and slams on the ground when he finds Patch's dead body is because he knows that he won't be able to get any more inside information regarding ongoing police investigations without having to ask. When Hazel and Chacha are invading the Umbrella Mansion, why do both Diego and Allison decide to engage in hand-to-hand combat with Chacha instead of just using their abilities? Allison says it's because Chacha pissed her off.
You want to rumor this, psycho?
I don't need to because this bitch just pissed me off.
Which I think is stupid, so she's gonna risk dying in this fight for the sake of giving Chacha a personal beatdown. Allison could easily incapacitate her with a few words. I will say, there's a chance that she's also hesitant to use her rumor ability because she vowed to stop using it after she was caught using it on her daughter, so there might still be some trauma there associated with her powers. But, even if that's the case, risking death in a fight would not be worth maintaining her integrity to herself regarding that. Diego, on the other hand, has no excuse, especially since he's the one who asks Allison why she's not using her powers against Chacha, even though he's not using them either. He could just stand back, close his eyes, and throw his knives at whatever part of her body he wants to damage. But instead, we get an unnecessary fight scene just so the writers can come up with a stupid way for Chacha to escape. Diego only stabs her once with his ability. Then doesn't use it again because of reasons. How about you try that again, bozo? This is why you're number 2, and Luther is number 1. Look at Luther just use all 350 pounds of that beautiful gorilla body to absolutely dominate Hazel. Gorilla Grodd could never.
Barack Obama, it will almost be an honor to kill you. Time to make America Grodd again.
Anyway, by the end of their fight, Allison and Diego somehow managed to lose sight of Chacha even though she was literally limping up the bloody stairs. How? When Klaus makes his jump to 1968 using the briefcase, Hazel and Chacha get a message from the commission reprimanding them for unauthorized round-trip travel.
Violation code 6874A, unauthorized round-trip travel 1968. Explanation required.
This means that the commission can apparently monitor whenever someone uses the briefcase and determine whether their use is authorized or unauthorized. If they are that cautious about the cases, then why wouldn't the briefcases be biometrically locked? Why wouldn't the commission restrict the temporal assassins from making unauthorized jumps? Why is that even a possibility without at least hacking the briefcase somehow first? The handler seems to have the ability to stop time wherever she lands, and she can choose whoever she wants to still be able to move around and talk to her normally when time is stopped. How does the Commission ever have trouble killing 5 with this ability? Why isn't every temporal assassin provided with this ability? Is it a trust thing? Even if it is, they'd absolutely at least give temporary access to this power to Hazel and Chacha if they're tracking down their most dangerous temporal assassin. The fact that this ability is established in one episode and just never utilized by the handler or the Commission at any point directly against 5 in their hunt and for him throughout both the first and second season just breaks every single scene where a temporal assassin is coming after 5. Allison has an ability that allows her to convince anybody to do anything she wants to do by saying the words, "I heard a rumor," followed by whatever she wants that person to do for her. At one point, we discover that Allison has used this ability numerous times to get ahead in life.
I heard a rumor that you like. I heard a rumor you left me alone. I heard a rumor that you stopped crying. I heard a rumor that I get it in one. I heard a rumor that you think I'm perfect for this. I heard a rumor that you love me.
And even ended up using it on her own child.
I heard a rumor. But you're really tired. You're really tired.
Given how flagrantly and frequently she's shown using this power growing up, I find it difficult to believe that Allison has never rumored or tried to rumor her dad into treating them better the entire childhood. We find out in the 3rd season that her ability doesn't work on her father, but since she's never shown to use it on Reginald as a child, I have to assume that she never does, which I don't believe given how careless she was with it in the past. Even if she tried to use it as a kid and it failed, why didn't she inform her siblings of that? That would be big news for them to discover. After a while, it's revealed that Pogo and Robot Grace assisted Reginald in committing his own suicide and planting clues to indicate that foul play may have been involved in his death. Reginald apparently did this with the hope that the family trying to solve the mystery of his murder would bring them together as a team in order to stop a coming threat. Grace's programming was altered so that she couldn't administer first aid that night. I have questions about this. If you're trying to create a murder mystery, why did you make it look like a heart attack instead of a homicide and leave behind more clues than just a missing monocle and some weird messages to Luther?
The autopsy report.
Dad's death was normal. Just a boring old heart failure.
I talked to Pogo. He said he couldn't find Dad's monocle.
And your point being?
Well, can you think of a single time that you saw Dad and he wasn't wearing that monocle? No. Which means someone took it. Which means there's a chance that he wasn't alone when he died. The last time that I talked to Dad, he sounded strange. He sounded on edge. Told me I should be careful who to trust.
Why not just make it obvious that foul play was involved, not to guarantee his children's involvement? What if they missed all the clues? Also,
I knew that the world would soon need him, need all of you, and I had to do what was necessary. Everything I did, everything I put you through, it was to prepare you, all of you, for something bigger than yourselves. You never understood that. You were meant to save the world. That I had to bring you all back together one way or another. The fate of the world depended on it.
what coming threat was Reginald so concerned about that warranted him faking his own death to try and reunite the Umbrella Academy? Was he fearful of the cleanse or of the Vanya apocalypse? If it's the latter, then how did he know about that? We'll come back to that question much later. Moreover, why did Reginald choose to kill himself just 8 days before the apocalypse and almost right before Five's arrival and not any earlier? The timing of his death is just really coincidental. Did he get information about the coming apocalypse and decide that he needed to act quickly? And if so, then how? Or was the timing of his suicide just completely coincidental? On top of that, why would Reginald think that the siblings would work together to solve the mystery of his murder and not just leave the issue for the police to solve, especially after being separated for so long and being so dysfunctional as a family? I feel like a less risky plan that he could have conducted to achieve the same result would be to just fake his kidnapping or death and leave behind several clues that a supervillain that the team had fought in the past might be responsible. He could have then just led the family on a wild goose chase as he monitored them from a distance and altered the chase in ways designed to make them cooperate with one another and resolve their issues. He obviously had the resources and the intelligence to pull this off, so why not just do that? His plan just seems highly reliant on hope, luck, and forgetting the current state of the siblings, which I wouldn't expect for a man as seemingly intelligent as him. Lastly, why didn't Reginald consider that the children might have just argued for a bit and then eventually chosen to shut down Grace after seeing the footage of her seemingly poisoning him and grabbing his monocle, and then just gone their separate ways? Down the line, we come to discover that as a child, Vanya killed 3 nannies for trying to make her eat a meal that she didn't want to consume. Those murders, coupled with her frequent incidents of losing control of her abilities during training, led to Reginald utilizing Allison to rumor Vanya into believing that she was just an ordinary person with no superpowers. He then provided her with mood stabilizers that she would take on a daily basis in order to suppress her powers and treated her as separate from the rest of the family. So, if Reginald knew that Vanya's abilities are tied to her emotions to the extent that he was scared of her inability to control them, Why didn't he bother trying a different approach to help her master abilities? He just tried to brute force it like he did with the other siblings, and when that didn't work, he opted to use pills and rumors. Why didn't he try making Allison rumor her into being able to control her abilities? Is it just because he's a stubborn person and wanted to do it his way? I think that's a weak excuse. I just don't buy that a man as intelligent as him would stake his safety and the safety of tons of people on the hope that Vanya would never have gone a day without forgetting to take her pills and that Allison would never have remembered that she rumored her sister. Again, it's all just too sloppy for a guy who's supposed to be really smart. If he had made Allison rumor Vanya to never go a day without taking her pills, then it might have been more believable. After Allison remembers rumoring Vanya as a child and informs her of this, Vanya gets angry and her powers activate. Allison attempts to rumor her to calm down, but Vanya quickly slices her neck and leaves her bleeding out on the floor. Allison is eventually rescued by her family, and when Vanya comes back home to apologize for her actions, Luther knocks her out and locks her in the same soundproof cell that she was locked in as a child by Reginald. When his siblings find out about this, they vilify Luther for his actions, particularly Allison. My problem with this is that Luther is completely right in restraining Vanya. He just goes about it the wrong way. Pogo knows everything about Vanya's past, and at this point he's revealed it to Luther. Why don't Pogo and Luther just gather the family together and explain that Vanya's powers, unlike theirs, are tied to her emotions, and that Vanya killed 3 nannies as a child just for trying to make her eat oatmeal, and that's why she was on mood stabilizers. Allison could corroborate this by remembering that Vanya sliced her throat in response to being angry about rumoring her as a child. They could then calmly explain all of this to Vanya once she gets to the house, and then I'm pretty sure she'd be willing to at least be temporarily restrained, or at the very least start retaking the mood stabilizers, considering how guilty she already felt for almost killing her sister at that point. I just don't think that the best approach to being told that their sister has powers that turn unstable based on her emotions is for Luther to try and forcibly restrain her, while she's probably in the most emotionally unstable position she's ever been in. I could believe that Luther might make this mistake because he's not really thinking straight after Vanya almost killed Allison, but I don't believe that Pogo would make this mistake, knowing everything he does about Vanya. Aside from stylistic reasons, why do Vanya's eyes change color and her skin turn pale when she escapes and uses her powers? That's never happened to her when she was a kid or when she's used her powers before. Why is it happening now? Is it because of the voices in her head, or... Also, why is she glowing? Where's all that light coming from? What does sound have to do with any of that? After Vanya escapes her cell, she begins to walk around the house, destroying everything she comes across. Amid her destruction, she comes across Pogo. Vanya asks Pogo if he knew about her powers. He says yes, and tries to plead his case to her by saying,
"Your father discovered that you were capable of great things, but your powers were too great. He only wanted to protect you from yourself, as well as your siblings. Vanya, I knew."
Come on, man. The problem was never that Vanya's powers were too great. Allison can make anyone do anything she wants. 5 could change the course of history, and Klaus is immortal and could summon Nami of the dead if he got sober enough to do so. Vanya being able to cause waves of destruction by amplifying sound was never the primary issue. The problem was that her abilities were linked to how she felt at any given moment, which made them unstable compared to her siblings' abilities. The lack of control over her powerful abilities is what made her a threat. Secondly, why does Pogo try to appeal to Vanya's relationship with her father by saying that he only wanted to protect her from herself as well as his siblings? Even if that's true, he knows how their father treated them, and he's aware of how much they resented him. Vanya especially. Why would he be dumb enough to think that fatherly love would sway her in any capacity? Lastly, why the heck doesn't Pogo bring up the fact that Vanya killed people as a child, or almost killed her sister, as evidence of her emotional instability? It may not have saved his life, but at the very least it would have given him a strong argument as to why they did what they did to her, and maybe even caused Vanya to think for a second before killing him. You get to see that incompetence isn't just rampant between Hazel and Chacha, it's seemingly the lifeblood of the Commission. Despite having over 5 men, wearing body armor, and armed with machine guns, relentlessly firing, the Commission's assassins are unable to kill a single unarmed member of the Umbrella Academy at a bowling alley. Why? Once the siblings get to Vanya's location, why do they decide to use the dumbest plan ever to try and capture her? Allison's initial plan is to just walk up to her and do something. She can't even talk. What is the plan? To just wait for her to finish her performance and hope that she's stable enough to watch her write down some messages and converse with her? Luther and Diego decide to just charge her on stage. And then what? Even if they had caught her off guard and captured her, what is their plan afterwards? She just escaped from a prison built to contain her. A more obvious solution to this would have been to gas the place by pumping knockout gas through the vents near the stage to take out Vanya temporarily without her noticing. Or 5 could have teleported to a pharmacy and asked for any mood stabilizer pills. At They could then try to get Diego to slingshot into Vanya's body, or maybe even try to shoot her with a tranquilizer from a distance, like from behind the stage. Again, with their powers, Five could have done any of these things quickly, and Diego could have absolutely made that shot from behind the stage. Afterwards, they could either keep her under indefinite sedation until they figure something out, or they could forcefully give her the mood stabilizer pills that kept her from accessing her abilities all her life. At least then they'd be able to talk to her and make her understand that she killed 3 nannies and almost killed her sister due to her unstable powers, and that's why they had to lock her up. In the middle of their fight with Vanya, the inept assassins show up, and oh my gosh, I can't do this anymore. I can't with these guys anymore. I can't. Everything they do here is just stupid. They fail to injure any of the siblings, despite having the high ground, more men, a clear view, machine guns, and the siblings having no protection besides chairs, which last time I checked aren't exactly bulletproof. They fail to kill Klaus as he's standing in the bloody open to summon Ben. Are they blind? Are these the people responsible for Victor's haircut? Despite being launched out of a car, Chachi eventually finds her way to the concert and comes across Diego, and they start fighting. How the heck is Chachi even able to stand her ground against Diego in this fight? She flew out the front windshield of a car onto the road at full speed with no seatbelt. She should have passed out just walking here. Also, once again, Diego. Hey, reminder, you have powers which work best from a distance, you moron! How about trying to get some distance away from Chacha and then just killing her with a well-directed knife through instead of trying to fight her like an idiot like you did the last time she invaded the house? Aside from stylistic reasons, why do Vanya's clothes turn white when she plays the violin? I know it's supposed to be a nod to the comics where she was the white violin. That's cool, but it also makes no sense. Is sound now connected to color somehow? It's a cool scene. It's just funny to me. Another stupid plan is concocted by Luther to charge Vanya from all sides. Come on, Luther. Why can't Klaus use Ben to try and restrain Vanya? He's already dead, so Vanya can't exactly hurt him while he's outside her body. Why can't Diego throw some knives at Vanya's legs or arms to incapacitate her with the violin itself so she can't play it anymore? Why can't Five teleport behind her and knock her out? Alison seemingly can, so why didn't he think of that? Why can't anyone think like a normal person at all in this situation? What the heck is even happening right now? Vanya's abilities relate to isolation, generation, and amplification of sound. What the heck does any of that have to do with holding people in the air with energy tentacles and sucking out their life force? I feel like we've already forgotten what she can do. Also, how the heck is Vanya doing any of this? She's not supposed to have control of her abilities, yet she seems to be able to conjure tentacle energy waves out of herself and restrain her siblings and suck out their life force with quite a bit of control. Why can't Five teleport out of her grip? Is she blocking his powers too? If so, then how? Why do all the siblings revert to their normal-looking selves after Vanya gets knocked out? Does the life force go back into them? What exactly was she doing to them? I'm just gonna avoid all the science questions that come with this by being very charitable and saying, yep, that's exactly what would happen if you shot a laser through the moon from Earth. After failing to stop the apocalypse, Five decides to use his time travel abilities to help him and his family escape the destruction. He says,
Apocalypse will always happen, and Vanya will always be the cause, unless we take her with us and fix her.
why the heck did he conclude that based on seeing her cause the apocalypse one time? The premise in the second season is that Five's time travel from the end of the first season sent the members of the Umbrella Academy back in time, but they were scattered across different years. They all landed at the same point in Dallas, Texas, but Klaus and Ben arrive on February 11th, 1960. Allison arrives in 1961. Luther arrives in 1962. Diego arrives on September 1st, 1963. Vanya arrives on October 12th, 1963. And Five arrives on November 25th, 1963. Upon Five's arrival, he witnesses yet another apocalypse, so he's taken 10 days back in time to recruit his siblings and once again try to stop the end of the world. The Swedes are able to pick up the mantle of ineptitude from Hazel and Chacha in the second season. Similar to Hazel and Chacha, these people make me question how the Commissioner survived for this long with such useless employees. Unlike the Commission's temporal assassins, I'll do my job and try my best to explain why the Swedes are just another group of clowns in different outfits. When they show up in 1963, just like Hazel and Chacha, the Swedes are attempting to kill the best temporal assassin in the history of the Commission, a man who can teleport, and the plan they choose to carry out is to come out of an ice cream truck, stare menacingly at their target from a distance, and then take out their guns to shoot him from a distance, instead of, ambushing him from the back or using a damn sniper. Later on, at the asylum, when hunting down Diego, instead of stealthily entering the facility and making sure they don't draw any unnecessary attention to themselves so as not to startle their targets and basically ensure his escape, The Swedes opt to make the loudest noises possible by gunning down anyone in their way with machine guns and a shotgun and turning on the emergency flashing lights. One thing I will say about the Swedes is, unlike Hazel and Cha-Cha, they don't figuratively shoot themselves in the foot. They go beyond and almost literally do that. For the sake of just coming across as weird and goofy, two of the Swedes play a game in which they throw knives at each other's feet, which leads to one of them getting stabbed in the thigh. Why the heck are they playing a game that might cause an injury that will actively impede the ability to carry out their jobs efficiently? When the Swedes find Vanya, they decide to block her car in the middle of the road and approach her from the front and side, and of course, all of them wait until she starts to move before they can react. Has no one at the Commission ever heard of the term stealth, or an ambush, or a sniper, or tailing someone's car? One of them is literally wearing all white in the middle of the night. It's like he wants to be spotted looking suspicious and die. To give the Swedes some credit, there is one good thing they do in their hunt for Five and his siblings. When two of the Swedes show up at Allison's house, the first thing they do is strike Allison's throat to stop her from using her abilities. It's probably the first intelligent thing they've done so far. Fast forwarding a bit, by the end of season 2, two of the Swedes are dead, and both their deaths are directly and indirectly attributable to the Handler. The Handler later gets into a fight with the Umbrella Academy and ends up killing all of them except for 5, who manages to save everyone by going back in time a few seconds. He then disarms the Handler, who's then killed by the last remaining Swede. The Swede then leaves and joins a cult, marking the second group of temporal assassins that failed their given assignment and end up killing the employee in the process. The Swedes do end up being more efficient than Hazel and Cha-Cha though, just because one of them actually manages to kill one of the intended targets. That's how low the bar is for the temporal assassins of the Commission after 5. Can they kill one person they wanted to kill? That's just sad and annoying. Moving over to the Umbrellas, when Allison lands in 1961 in Dallas, Texas, she's still mute and unluckily has to deal with the racial discrimination at the time. Luckily, she's able to get a job at a salon as well as a loving husband named Raymond Chestnut. Her voice comes back after a year, and in that time she's grown to think of her abilities as a secondary tool in stressful situations rather than a primary one. When a businessman attempts to antagonize the people in that salon because of their race, Allison kicks him out. That man later retaliates by having her husband, Raymond, arrested for attacking a man without provocation. Raymond is then temporarily held in a jail cell, and Allison is prevented from seeing him when she tries to do so. My question is, why doesn't Allison just use her rumor powers to get her husband out of prison? I understand that at this point, she's trying to live an honest life that's built on sincere interactions, so she doesn't end up in the position that led to her divorce. But she's also living in an era where all the odds are stacked against her due to the racial bias at the time. She'd be completely justified in using her abilities to avoid the legal consequences that come about due to prejudice against black people at the time. The fact that she tries to use it to stop the cop from arresting her husband in the previous episode means she's open to using her rumor powers in serious situations. So why not use it now? I feel like the only reason she doesn't use her abilities right away in the most logical scenarios is to allow the writers to stretch out a plotline for a lot longer than it needs to go on, or to force certain interactions like Raymond and Klaus to take place. Allison and Klaus do eventually reunite in the 1960s, and they talk about her husband being in prison. When Klaus asks her why she doesn't just rumor her way out of the situation, she says,
I haven't used my power since I couldn't speak for a year. I actually really like who I am without it. Everything I have, I've earned, and it feels really good, you know?
okay, I get that. But this is 1963. You're not trying to get a movie role or make someone like you or get your daughter to fall asleep. You're trying to get a man who was wrongfully imprisoned out of a jail cell. Using your powers for this wouldn't be self-serving. It would be a moral good. In fact, you could argue that failing to use her powers for this actually makes her a bad guy, because the entire justice system is slanted against her at this point. She has no idea that her husband will even make it out of prison, and at any point, the guy who put him in there might decide to kill him or rough him up a bit in order to teach her a lesson about messing with him. So the longer he's in there, the less time he has to plan for the sit-in. By failing to use her powers to combat evil, all she's doing is making things harder for her husband and enabling even more evil to occur. Saying she won't use her powers because everything she's gotten without it feels earned is a bit selfish in this case. I don't believe that she wouldn't realize that. Like I said, I think the writers just want to have some made-up drama. Something that annoys me is that when the Swedes invade Allison's home and try to kill her and Raymond, Allison rumors one of them into killing his brother, which is good. She finally uses her powers in a fight with someone. But after he's done, she just lets him leave instead of killing him as well or making him forget what she just made him do. What does she think is going to happen after he leaves? There's a massive chance that he'll want revenge on her for making him do that. Why would she just let him run away? In the second episode of this season, Luther sees Vanya and tries to grab a gun and try to kill her for almost killing Allison, as well as killing Pogo, Grace, and the entire planet. However, When he meets her and realizes that she has amnesia, he changes his mind and chooses to apologize to Vanya instead. I am not okay with the apology that he gives. When Vanya attempts to apologize first, after presuming she did something wrong to him, he says,
"You shouldn't be the one to apologize."
Even though at this point she's killed Pogo, destroyed the house which ended up killing their mother, she almost killed their sister and temporarily left her mute, she killed 3 nannies as a child, which he would be aware of given Pogo told him everything about her, and she caused the apocalypse. Sure, the reasons behind those actions were due to emotional outbursts and psychological trauma that came about as a result of finding out she'd been lied to by her father, rumored by her sister, lied to by her boyfriend, and rightfully locked up by her family, but she still did all those things. Harold Jenkins was abused by his father as a child and ridiculed by his idol, but that didn't give him any right to manipulate Vanya and kill the cabin owner and the girl in the first chair. He was still culpable for his bad choices, and he deserved to be punished for those choices. The same logic should apply to Vanya. It's good that we understand why she did all those awful things, but she still did those awful things, and I find it baffling that Luther says she shouldn't be apologizing for anything. Luther then says,
"I let you down. I did horrible things, things that I'm not proud of. When I could have just tried helping you. I thought it was my job to keep everyone safe, and I just made it all worse. If you're hiding out here and don't want to be found, I understand. I just came here to tell you that I'm sorry for my part in what happened."
Again, I don't believe Luther should be apologizing or feeling guilty over locking her up. It's just his approach to it that was the issue. Vanya had just almost killed her sister in a fit of rage, and he had just found out from Pogo that she had extremely powerful but unstable abilities that were tied to her emotions. I don't blame him for choosing to knock her out and restrain her until he figured out what to do, considering how dangerous she was. He just went about it the wrong way. There's a point in the 4th episode when Harlan drowns in a lake and Vanya has to rescue him, so she uses her powers to raise a segment of the water in the lake so that she can see Harlan's body and resuscitate him. It's a cool scene, but how the heck does Vanya manage to control her abilities well enough to do this if she doesn't remember the training she underwent as a child thanks to Allison rumoring her, and she doesn't remember the minimal amount of training she had with Harold Jenkins thanks to her memory loss? Her powers are supposed to be unstable because they're tied to her emotions, so if she's panicking over the kid's location and she tries to use her powers, shouldn't the result be something akin to her blowing away all the water in the lake? Down the line, the handler makes a deal with Five for him to kill the board of directors of the commission in exchange for access to a briefcase that'll take him back to 2019 with no apocalypse there, or in 1963. Five agrees to this deal and carries out the job using an axe in combination with his blinking ability to slaughter almost all the members of the board. Again, the scene is cool, but how is there not a mountain of security outside the room and outside the building protecting probably the most important people at the commission? AJ at one point says,
"Call security!"
So they're clearly somewhere. Where the heck are they, and why aren't they nearer? Also, Five is one of the most, if not the most famous person at the commission. How the heck does no one recognize and attempt to capture him or inform the board of his presence? How does security not see him before he gets to the boardroom? Are there no cameras? Lastly, the handler never really explained to Five how she was going to ensure the apocalypse doesn't happen in 2019. What's she going to do to stop it exactly, and why doesn't Five ask her about the specifics of how she'll do it in order to ensure that she's not lying? When the handler's deal doesn't pan out, Five is forced to turn to the one person he trusts less than anybody, himself. Currently, the older version of Five that worked for the commission is present in 1963 with a briefcase. Five's plan is to consult that version of himself and convince him to give him the briefcase in exchange for providing him with the correct formula so he can jump to 2019 without getting trapped in the younger version of his own body. In doing that, the current young version of Five will also age up. This plan eventually backfires. Old Five gets the formula and jumps to 2019, but his briefcase is destroyed in the process. Now, bear with me, because this is about to get way more confusing. To begin with,
I was sent to 1963 on a job by the commission to make sure the president was assassinated.
Your old self is out there.
Precisely. Walking around Dallas with a briefcase that can get us home. If old me doesn't travel back to 2019 like he's supposed to, the whole thing unravels itself. I cease to exist. You got me?
Based on the fact that current young Five states that if current old Five doesn't jump to 2019, everything will unravel and they'll cease to exist. But the fact that he personally says that he did have a briefcase before he made his 2019 jump, I assume that means that we're dealing with a single timeline for now. With that in mind, what that implies is that originally, current young Five had a briefcase before he made his jump to 2019, and for some reason, maybe because he didn't want the commission to track him or because the briefcase wouldn't allow it, he chose to not use that case to make the jump and instead decided to leave it behind before making that jump. If that's the case, then Five has no reason to interact with himself to get access to the case. When we were previously shown current young 5 jumping to 2019, it was confirmed that he didn't carry a briefcase with him. That means that he either left it in 1963 or it was never there originally and is just being added to serve the plot now. It's probably the latter. But taking it in good faith and assuming it's the former, that means the current young 5 could have just waited for the current old 5 to jump to 2019 and then grab the briefcase that he left behind. The defense I've seen for this is that the first trip to 2019 we saw and the current trip to 2019 that's about to happen are not the same because this current one is happening in a different timeline. The logic behind that is that when the siblings arrive in 1963, they create a new alternate timeline due to the interactions in 1963, and that events that played out a certain way originally will now happen differently. I have two problems with this reasoning, however. The first is that the show clearly expects you to treat all the events as happening in the same timeline because the current young 5 expects to revert to his old self after current old 5 jumps to 2019 with the correct formula.
I need you to jump. If you don't jump, I cease to exist. What I need from you is to jump correctly. First time through, I got the calculation wrong. That's how I ended up in this body. But now I know the correct calculation. I'll be glad to tell you. In exchange for that briefcase.
And he also states that if current old 5 doesn't jump to 2019, then the entire timeline unwinds and they cease to exist. The second problem that I have is the fact that even if it was an alternate timeline, none of what the siblings do in 1963 interferes in any way with the current older 5's original mission in that time period until they decide to directly meet him. Before their meeting, he was doing everything in the exact same manner that the current young 5 did in his timeline. If that's the case, even assuming an alternate timeline, without Luther and current young 5 interfering with current old 5 should still make the same mistakes that were originally made by current young 5 that led to him leaving behind his briefcase. And if that's the case, then again, current young 5 could have just waited for current old 5 to go to 2019 and then grab the left behind briefcase. I know that was a bit confusing, but buckle up because there's more.
We put the decimal in the wrong spot in our proof of the existence of a bound for the number of limit cycles of planar polynomial vector fields. We wrote down 5.7. It should be 0.57. Son of a bitch!
Since current old 5 jumps to 2019 with the correct formula, but current young 5 doesn't revert to his old self, we can assume one of three things happened. Either, 1, it's a single timeline and current young 5 gave current old 5 an incorrect formula and current old 5 still failed to stop the apocalypse and the events played out the same way again. 2, the formula was correct, but current old 5 used all the information he obtained from current young 5 about the apocalypse to prevent it from happening and is now living in an alternate timeline, so the formula has no impact on the current young 5's body. Or 3, it's a single timeline, but the formula was correct and current old 5 did jump to 2019 with his old body intact, but current young 5's body didn't change in any way because it's a plot hole. This is where the show breaks itself. Brace yourselves. Like I said, the show wants to consider this as a single timeline based on the fact that current young 5 expects to revert to his old self after current old 5 jumps to 2019 with the correct formula, and the fact that he also states that if current old 5 doesn't jump to 2019, then the entire timeline will unwind and the current versions of themselves will cease to exist. The issue is, it's literally impossible for it to be in a single timeline, because if it was, then when current old 5 jumps to 2019 with information about the apocalypse...
Yeah, that's a waste of time. But the guy belonged to didn't end the world. Vanya did. Turns out she was pretty pissed about the way we all treated her when we were kids. So she destroyed the moon and ended the world.
We now know exactly what's going to happen. A much better plan is for us to travel to 2019. All we have to do is make nice with Vanya, stop her from destroying the world. Easy peasy.
The events should unwind like 5 said, and the current 1963 versions of themselves should either no longer exist thanks to all the alterations that current old 5 will presumably make to 2019 with the information that he now has, or they should exist if current old 5 still fails to stop the apocalypse even with his information, but their memories should be completely altered. At the same time, however, if it's an alternate timeline, then if current old 5 is going to go into an alternate timeline after current young 5 gives him information about the apocalypse, none of that will cause any changes to current young 5's body, and none of that will erase the apocalypse that has already happened in current young 5's timeline. The fact that current young 5 assumes that everything will happen in a single timeline means that he didn't at all consider that the moment current 5 jumps to 2019 and uses the information that he gave him to alter that 2019, the current 1963 versions of him and his siblings will be drastically altered. The fact of the matter is, it's an alternate timeline. 5's interaction with himself will create an alternate timeline when he jumps to 2019. But the show has no idea that that's what would happen, so they just make 5 assume it's a single timeline, but they also make him oblivious to the implications of that to his current self, even though he should be smart enough to know those implications. It's all a mess. Now, I know all that was probably very confusing for some people, but trust me, it all made sense. Anyway, let's calm our brains down by looking at something much, much stupider. How the Commission tries to kill the Umbrellas. At the farm, the handler shows up to try and get to Harlan under the guise of wanting to arrest Five for the murder of the board and killing the rest of the family too, I guess. She summons a literal army of temporal assassins, and of course, the first thing they do is try to run after Diego and Five instead of immediately shooting at them the second they get the order to fire. Also, why the heck did the handler summon and position her entire army directly in front of the barn where Harlan is hiding instead of positioning them around the barn so they can easily close in on all the Umbrellas and not have any blind spots? How the heck are the guys at the back supposed to shoot if there's hundreds of people in front of them and they can barely see their targets? What are those people doing? Oh, and by the way, I don't even think I need to mention stuff like this anymore, but at this point, oh my gosh, this literal army doesn't manage to land a single shot on a single person in an open, bloody field. How are they this inept? I guess that must be the Commission's motto: you miss 100% of the shots you take. Towards the end of the fight, the handler shows up and does the obvious thing. She shoots everyone in the room dead, except for Five, something an entire army of assassins, Hazel and Cha-Cha and the bloody Swedes couldn't do somehow. In the season finale, after the siblings manage to defeat the handler, Five asks Herb for a briefcase so he can head back to his original timeline, and Herb tells him to grab any briefcase he wants from the dead Commissioner agents. Five then uses that briefcase to transport him and his siblings to, presumably, a 2019 with no apocalypse. They arrive on April 2nd, 2019, one day after the apocalypse. And there's no destruction in sight, meaning they stop the apocalypse from happening. So, did the Commission agree to erase Vanya's apocalypse, and if so, how? They seem shocked by the fact there's no apocalypse when they arrive. So, are they partially expecting to go back to the post-apocalyptic world they had left behind? What exactly did they do in 1963 that made them think that there might not be an apocalypse when they go back to 2019? The apocalypse already happened. To stop it, they would have to stop Vanya from blowing up the moon before traveling back to 1963. And they haven't done that. All they've done is roam around in the 1960s. I know the explanation for all this is that it's an alternate timeline and that has its own complex problems, believe me. But that's not my issue right now. When the Umbrellas are jumping from 1963 to 2019, they are hoping to find a non-apocalyptic 2019, but why? What exactly have they done that makes them hopeful that when they go back to the future, the apocalypse will be magically erased? Five must know by now that since he didn't physically age up, old Five must have either been unsuccessful or, more likely, he launched an alternate timeline and had no impact on his apocalypse timeline. And the Umbrellas didn't even consult Herb and Dot before they jumped to confirm that there will be no apocalypse when they get back. So, were they just relying on blind hope? I know it sounds like a tedious complaint, but I just find the hope the siblings have in not landing in a post-apocalyptic future to be bizarre, given that they've made no efforts to stop that outcome. Anyway, let's see what contrivances Season 3 has to offer. The premise for the third season, according to Caesar's cousin, is that the Umbrella Academy doesn't land in the 2019 that they came from, but rather, they land in a different version of 2019. In this new world, on the 12th hour of the first day of October 1989, 16 women around the world gave birth, and none of these women had been pregnant when the day first began. Reginald Hargreaves, eccentric billionaire and adventurer, sought to locate and adopt as many of these unique children as he could. He obtained 7 of these children and molded them into a superhero team known as the Sparrow Academy. As a result, the Umbrellas have to figure out their place in this new world and realize what other changes to their history have been made and how to deal with them. Following their arrival in this new reality, the Umbrella Academy almost immediately gets into a fight with the Sparrow Academy over who the house they are currently in belongs to. In that fight, once again, the Umbrellas choose to use the stupidest tactics to combat their opponents. Some of the mistakes they make in the fight may be attributable to them being less well trained, but there are other mistakes that they make that are just unjustifiably stupid. For example, Diego only uses his knives against Christopher even after he sees that he's clearly impervious to them, instead of using them on the other sparrows. You know, the ones made of pierceable flesh. Allison also foolishly chooses to fight first instead of staying at a distance and just rumoring everyone. What do the different color changes that Christopher goes through even indicate? He changes from orange to blue after exposure to Vanya's power, but why? What does it mean? Why is the VFX so bad in this scene of Marcus exercising? The building he's standing on clearly looks like a set, and he has this weird blurry light around his body that makes it look like he's separate from the background. Even the way they have him do the backflip makes it so obvious that he's on wires. It's so unnaturally smooth, and I don't know if this is because he doesn't have a shadow, but when he lands, it doesn't look like his shoes are actually making contact with the ground for some reason. At one point, Vanya goes to a library and reads a book regarding the adventures in the 1960s. Apparently in this new timeline, thanks to their efforts in 1963, they are known as the Kennedy Six in the history books, a group that tried to assassinate JFK. There's a record of their names, pictures, and assumed affiliations at the time, For example, Diego is designated as a Cuban spy, and 5 is listed as KGB. The book actually has some funny details, and it's good to see that some effort was actually put into it. While I was reading it, I did notice 2 small errors. The first is that under Vanya's section, they use the word communist instead of the plural communists when referring to the siblings. The second error is that when referencing the assassination of JFK, they use the word assignation instead of assassination, which is funny. Something weird with this season that they kept showing this woman and some of the hotel dudes numerous times. The camera would frequently cut to her and some guy just doing something trivial, like whispering to each other. I don't understand why that happened. Initially thought she was the handler, but she just ends up being a random person, so I don't know what the point of that was. In the second episode, Diego and Stanley fight Alfonso and Jamie at a shop. Alfonso's power happens to be pain reflection. Hence, if you hurt him, you're the one that will feel the pain of your attack on him on the same spot that you hit him. They're consistent with this ability for about 3 seconds. For some unexplained reason, Diego's hits just don't get reflected after a few hits. He's able to knee Alfonso's belly, kick him in the face, and hurt his leg without incurring any damage to his own body, but when Stanley slices Alfonso across his thigh, the injury is reflected onto his own body in that case. The application of this power is just really inconsistent in this fight. Oh yeah, and Alfonso's chin falls off for some reason. If anyone was curious why Alfonso looks the way he does, it's because according to the showrunner, his ability takes a toll on his body. His body is apparently breaking down over time from all the damage that gets inflicted on it. Even though he's reflecting the injuries, his body does still take some of the damage. This is why part of his chin falls off when Diego kicks him. I'd like to mention that when 5 is showing his siblings the book containing the details of the mother's deaths, the date listed for their deaths is Sunday, October 1st, 1989. And I confirmed that, yeah, that date was indeed a Sunday. I just thought that accuracy was neat. Speaking of dead moms, let's talk about 5's paradox. In his travels with Klaus, 5 discovers that in this reality, their mothers died before they were ever born. And as a result, their existence creates a paradox known as a grandfather paradox. We later get an explanation for the grandfather paradox in the form of a commission presentation. Basically, if you go back in time to kill your grandfather before he meets your grandmother, you were never conceived, in which case, how do you go back in time to kill your grandfather in the first place? And the loop repeats. The explanation is accurate, but what the siblings are going through is not a grandfather paradox. Bear with me because this is about to get very confusing again. What happened was that the siblings went back in time from 2019 to 1963 to avoid the apocalypse. After their 1960s adventures, the commission enabled them to go back to a 2019 with no apocalypse. Still don't know how that was achieved, by the way. They arrived the day after the 2019 apocalypse is supposed to happen in a reality where their mothers died before they were ever born. What they are currently in is a new timeline separate from the original. We know this because in the previous season, Old 5 going to the past with the correct formula and information about the apocalypse had no impact on either Young 5's body or the memories of the Umbrella Academy, even though in a single timeline it should have, whether or not he was successful in stopping the apocalypse. Additionally, before he finds out about their mother's deaths, 5 mentions that there are other versions of them running around in the 2019 that they are currently in.
Dad didn't adopt us as babies, but those babies still existed here. Just grew up in different places with different people. Odds are we each have identical versions of ourselves walking around out there, living completely different lives.
If they were alive, those are the versions of them would be versions from a new timeline in which they never experienced an apocalypse and went back to 1963, while the current versions of them would be refugees from the timeline in which the apocalypse did happen, a timeline that they are no longer in now. For it to be a grandfather paradox, the events would have to take place within the same timeline. For example, the siblings would have to go back in time from Apocalypse 2019 to 1989 to blow up their mothers and then go back to the Apocalypse 2019 and grapple with their impossible existence. In this case, the siblings do not go back to the Apocalypse 2019. They go to a 2019 in which their mothers died before their conception and their father adopted a different group of siblings, the Sparrows. It's not a direct act that they perform that contradicts their future existence. It's a series of actions they perform in 1963 that create a ripple effect which leads the timeline down a separate path where the mothers die and Reginald adopts the Sparrows. The existence of the current siblings isn't a paradox, they're just refugees from a different timeline who are stuck in a new timeline. The 1963 to 2019 apocalypse timeline is still out there. There's still an apocalypse in that 2019 that they escaped from, which means that this is not a grandfather paradox. This is multiverse theory. Kill me and kill me now.
I don't think we're in a multiverse in this season. I think we're actually tracking the season 2 timeline. The only difference was Hargreaves did not adopt the Umbrella kids. He said, forget them. And he adopted a different set of kids. But I mean, it's still the same house. It's still the same bedrooms. It's just the Umbrella kids say, you're in our house. And then the Sparrows say, no, we're not. So it really is only the same timeline. We haven't gone multiverse yet. I'm not saying we couldn't down the road, but right now we're still in the season 2 timeline.
Not true. That's a lie.
You are a liar! He's lying! You lie!
Lies. Oh, lies!
You sit on a throne of lies.
That's a lie.
Liar!
He's a liar. The demon is a liar.
A liar? You're just a liar!
You lying snake! He will like to confuse us.
Stretching the truth.
You are a bald-faced liar. You're a fucking liar!
Don't lie right now.
You lie!
You're a liar.
You liar! Liar! You're a liar!
No, it's a vicious lie.
You must be quite a liar.
In the third episode, the Umbrellas ask for a meeting with the Sparrows at the Hotel Obsidian so they can explain that they don't have their brother Marcus. Unfortunately, the Sparrows don't believe them, and a fight between the two families ensues. Marv is able to incapacitate the Umbrellas at first, but Harlan shows up and releases a blast that kills Alfonso and Jamie. The rest of the Sparrows then run away. Couple questions. Why wouldn't the Umbrellas suggest meeting the Sparrows at their mansion or in a neutral public area with no civilians instead of the hotel they are staying at? Why does the VFX of Marv incapacitating the siblings look like something from a bad episode of The Flash? Why didn't Harlan's blast get reflected by Alfonso? Why doesn't the blast hurt Marv? Why is it so resilient to damage? Why is the color of Harlan's powers orange instead of blue like Victor's? Why did the stairs that Harlan was hiding on turn to ice when he was on them? Did that have something to do with his powers, or was it just a really chilly night that caused the metal stairs to freeze and not the humans? And why will none of these questions ever be answered? Why the heck is the Kugelblitz wiping out the members of the Commission? The only time we were shown when the Commission is was in the first season. Well, it was shown that they seemed to be working from a place in 1955. So is the Kugelblitz wiping out the entire timeline? Or is the wiping out of the Commission people an immediate effect following the development of a Kugelblitz? I have to assume it's the latter because for some reason, in 2019, it's random groups of people and animals that get wiped out with each Kugelblitz. But by the time Five and Lila get to the Commission, everyone is gone. The unanswered questions continue to mount when Five meets the founder of the Commission, who just so happens to be a much older version of Five with a missing arm and a chest tattoo. The founder says that the bunker that they are in is paradox-proof, and that he constructed it as part of a panic room in case of a collapse of the time continuum. He also says that in this room, all permutations of yourself can exist. When Five asks the founder how to fix the Kugelblitz, he responds with,
You don't.
and says that
What will be left is oblivion.
the founder then tells him not to save the world and dies. Five then cuts out his chest tattoo. What the heck, man? So, based on the information that he gives, the founder is a version of Five that has already gone through all the series of events, right up until his arm gets chopped off, but for some reason, in his case, Reginald's plan to reset the entire universe didn't work, and as a result, the universe was destroyed. But he managed to escape. He then aged up with a missing arm, and at some point in time, he decided to found the Commission to maintain the timeline. He then constructed this bunker to protect himself when the Kugelblitz comes. If that's what happened, why doesn't the founder just tell Five everything that's about to happen to him in order to give him a better chance of stopping the Kugelblitz and not ending up like him? I have to assume that the founder wants to ensure him and the Commission never exist because in a single timeline, like the show wants me to pretend this is, if Five followed the founder's instructions and didn't have to save the world, he would probably have ended up dead, and as a result, he never would have been able to become the founder and the Commission would never have existed. Lastly, I'm going to be extremely charitable here and say that literally nobody at the Commission knew that the founder was Five, because if they did, then why the heck would they have tried to kill him numerous times? That would break everything, and I don't want to go down that miserable road. So, I'm going to be very, very generous and say that somehow no one in this massive organization had any idea who started it. We find out by Harlan touching Victor that after Cece's death, Harlan released a large amount of energy that killed the Umbrella's parents in 1989 via brain hemorrhages. Why does Harlan have telekinesis, energy blast, whatever the hell this is, the ability to make someone see into his memories via physical contact? Most of these powers have nothing in common and have nothing to do with Victor's ability to manipulate sound, which is where he got the powers from. Why are his abilities just so random? The logic of Harlan killing the mothers is fine. According to him, he's connected to them via Marigold and can feel their presence, so it makes sense that an emotional outburst might cause him to connect to them and accidentally harm them. Vanya confirms in this scene that Harlan ended up killing 27 of the Marigold mothers during his emotional outburst.
It was an accident.
27 dead women is not an accident.
Why didn't he just end up killing all the Marigold mothers? Can be an issue of time since they all got pregnant with the Marigold at the same time. And it certainly can't be due to geographical distribution, because all the Umbrella's moms are in different parts of the world. Vanya's mom is in Russia and she still dies. Why were Harlan's hemorrhages only selective to the 27 Marigold mothers and not the Sparrow mothers if the Marigold was the thing that linked them all together? When Klaus meets his mother in the afterlife, she tells him that she wants him to find a purpose and that he has been running away from the thing that was right in front of him this entire time. Klaus then looks at his soup and a buffalo shape starts to form from the food. It is obviously supposed to be foreshadowing for the events in the buffalo suite. But how the heck does Klaus's mother know about any of that? What exactly was she thinking of when showing him the buffalo symbol? Does she know about Oblivion? And if so, how? I just want to point out that it's really stupid for Darth Ben, Marv, and the Crow to be standing this close to something that at this point they know killed their brother Marcus, just so they can try to examine it in a really dumb way. I'd also like to point out that in this scene, Darth Ben refuses to allow the Umbrellas to help him with the Kugelblitz until they give him Harlan first, which I just don't believe. He's not self-centered enough for me to buy that he would just let a black hole keep swallowing up the planet until he got his petty revenge. I think it's extremely convenient that the name Harlan comes up with to describe the particles inside him.
I didn't know what it was. I called it Marigold.
Like the flower?
Also ends up being the actual name of those particles.
Years ago, I synthesized a new element.
The particle we know is Marigold.
And at the same moment, a second particle was created, Durango.
So I guess he was just really, really good at naming things. Harlan eventually admits to Allison that he killed their moms. Allison blames him for Claire's non-existence, and then she kills him and delivers his body to the Sparrows. The logic behind Allison's murder of Harlan is a bit nonsensical to me. If Harlan hadn't killed their moms, Reginald already said that he specifically tried to avoid adopting them in this new reality after the interaction in 1963, after seeing how incompetent they were as a family and a team.
Once your oafish tribe showed me what a poor job I did with my first selections, I adopted them instead of you. Dad! I'm not your father, young man.
So, if they were alive, they still would have been raised by completely different families and lived in completely different circumstances from the 2019 apocalypse timeline, in which case, Alice would not have married Peter and Claire still wouldn't have been born. The thing is, even if Reginald had adopted them after the 1963 interaction and the siblings had grown up and became the same people they were back in the 2019 apocalypse timeline, that would just mean that there would have been another version of Allison with the exact same history as her out there, with her own version of Claire and her own version of Peter, who at this time would have full custody of Claire. Sure, Claire would still exist in this scenario, but I doubt she would have been allowed to see her by either Peter or this alternate reality version of herself, to be honest. And that's the less likely timeline. The first scenario is more likely what would have actually happened if Harlan had killed their moms, so even as a means of revenge, his death was pointless. Moving over to the demon, we learned that after Lila escaped with the briefcase at the end of Season 2, she went back to the Commission, killed a bunch of people, and used the ISP to see the reality where her mother killed her before Five went back in time and saved everyone. Herb and Dot then tell her there's a new regime at the Commission and that people don't want her there, but she retorts by saying that's just because her mother's dead now and people want the daughter's head as well. And then Herb and Dot give her a briefcase and let her make a one-way trip to any timeline she wants. She chooses to go to West Berlin in 1989, where she gets her mother's stashed briefcase in the Berlin Wall. I have problems with this. Herb and Dot offer her a chance to escape to any timeline she wants. Why the heck are they helping her? They just walked past the bodies of their own comrades that she killed. She was always mean to both of them. She was the handler's right-hand man, and she's a pathological liar. Why would Herb and Dot just let someone like this, with future knowledge and commission knowledge, go to any timeline she wants without even considering the consequences? And why would they be helping the right-hand man of the person who they led the charge to oppose? They should be trying to detain her. The fact that Lila is able to use her briefcase to go to 1963 and 2019, but she's not able to use it to jump from 2019, confirms to me that the Kugelblitz only affects the year that it's in. Its effects to that year are only from when it starts, and those effects move forward with time. If that's the case, why didn't everybody at the Commission use the briefcases to escape to the past until they figured out a way to fix the Kugelblitz? Why were the waves affecting them exactly, given where they are in time? Lastly, the handler hiding a time-traveling briefcase in a wall that's going to collapse is stupid. Yes, she can access it at any time she wants, but what if someone finds it and uses it? She should have just put it in a bunker underground somewhere remote. While arguing with the siblings about Harlan's death, Victor says,
I don't know how to bring Claire back. Okay, no one does.
Well, Victor, I do, and I'll tell you how for free. After teaming up with the Sparrows and fixing up the Kugelblitz temporarily, use a now presumably temporarily functioning briefcase or 5 Sparrows and go back in time to 1963 to the moment right after you said goodbye to Cece. Then take away Harlan's remaining marigold. After this, find your dad and use Allison to rumor him into forgetting he ever met them in 1963. Then go back to 2019. The new timeline will have triplicate versions of yourself with the same history as you, and Claire will be alive with one of the alternate versions of Allison. The reason it's triplicate is because you'll have the first group, the current siblings, who go back to 2019 to prevent their mothers from dying and ensure their father adopts them. The second group, the original siblings, who went back to 1963 to stop the apocalypse, who now return to a fixed timeline with no apocalypse and no dead mothers thanks to the first group's changes. And the third group of siblings, the native siblings, were the ones that grew up in the fixed timeline as a result of the first group fixing things in 1963 and ensuring their mothers didn't die. The three Allisons can then either try to cohabitate and share Claire with each other and risk paradox psychosis, or two of them can go Scarlet Witch and try to steal the daughter of one of the native versions of themselves. That's how you get Claire back. It's not pretty, but neither are your inconsistent rules for time travel, so this is the best you're getting from me. It's been asked already, but I'm asking again, why the heck does Allison making contact with Harlan and Victor's marigold transfer allow her to be able to use her powers without saying, I heard a rumor first? I've already mentioned it in my characters video, but I'll mention it here again. Crazy robot Grace dying by Five teleporting her away from a fight and snapping her neck doesn't make any sense. Original robot Grace had her neck snapped in the flashback with Vanya as a kid and was fine. How the heck would this work on crazy robot Grace, who seems to have mostly the same build as her? The Kugel Blitz is re-released when Fate taps a wine glass against Marth's body. The vibrations somehow cause Marth to explode and release it. Instead of doing the normal thing and running away, when a box containing a black hole is breaking apart and clearly about to explode, Faye stupidly decides to move closer to the box as she says,
I'm going to help you, just...
Her power is summoning crows. What the heck was she planning to do to fix a box containing a black hole that's about to explode? I'd also like to point out that it's incredibly convenient that anytime a Kugelblitz wave is unleashed, it just never swallows up any of the umbrellas at any point. They all just have some kind of magical armor, some might call it plot armor, that allows them to survive multiple waves that are taking out hordes of people and objects at random. Luther and Sloan decide to have a wedding in the middle of the apocalypse, and I'd like to say that it was really nice of the Kugelblitz, which had swallowed most of the world so far, to stop for a couple of hours and let the siblings have a nice wedding. Why didn't Reginald lock the damn door when him and Allison were making their deal? Oh, because Five needs to see their deal for plot points to happen. Why didn't Luther ever mention the fact that there was a massive invisible fence on the moon to anyone? Why exactly is Abigail Hargreaves in a cryogenic tube on the moon instead of a cryogenic tube on Earth? Why did she have to be put on the moon specifically? Death dies by Kugelblitz, and it's a better death than he had in Supernatural. Any detail is that the 9th episode of this show ends with the entire universe being consumed by the Kugelblitz, and it's the only episode in the series that ends with credits against a white background instead of a black one. How the heck is Klaus able to show up in Hotel Oblivion of the physical body after his body was destroyed by the Kugelblitz? His power is coming back to life, not creating life. Or is he not physically there? It is just solidifying his ghostly self, like he did with Ben in the first season. Jumping to the conclusion, Hotel Oblivion begins to transform into some kind of machine that sucks out the marigold from the siblings. Reginald goes to a computer-looking machine and begins to do some weird calculations. Allison says that this wasn't part of their deal and that he's hurting the siblings. Reginald then says that he can't stop now because it would shut down the machine, and he explains the hotel was a facade and that they're stuck in a machine in another dimension and that whoever created the universe built this place. He says that the particles inside their bodies are the only things that fuel the machine. Five tells her that he killed Klaus and Luther and that he won't stop until they're all dead. So Allison tells him to stop. He says he's almost done, and once he is, they'll both get what they came for. She then tells him that he's killing them, to which he says,
Everything in life has a price.
Okay, Rumpelstiltskin. She tries to rumor him to stop, but it doesn't work, so she grabs the axe left behind by the dead samurai monster and slices his skull, and we see green blood. Allison sees a red button on the computer screen, so she presses it, but before she does, Victor gets a chance to stop her but chooses not to. The rest of the siblings are too wasted to help at this point. I have a million questions about all this from a world-building perspective, but only several for the plot. My first question is, how did Allison not think for a second that the guy who killed both of her brothers and lied to them for the majority of their childhoods would be willing to kill the rest of her siblings to achieve his own goals? How does she even trust that she won't be killed to achieve them, or that he won't just backstab her? Why didn't she try to rumor him ahead of time to tell all the details as an attempt to avoid a later betrayal? How did she not discuss the specific details of what Reginald planned to do? He promised to give her a reality where the siblings were all fine and she had Claire and Raymond back. How did she not question the specifics of that plan? Why doesn't her room ability work on him? Is it because he's an alien, or because he's immune to Marigold, or has made himself immune to her powers somehow? Who knows? Human drugs were able to subdue him, so why wouldn't Allison's power do the same? Is it because of the place they're in? Who knows? Lastly, Allison pressing that button is really stupid. She didn't even know if Reginald had finished whatever calculations he was doing before she killed him. She literally has no concrete idea what pressing that button will do. My second question is, how the heck does Reginald know how to read, interpret, and use a machine that resets the universe? Like, how does he know that if he stops, that the machine will stop? Or how to make the changes necessary to revive his wife, bring back Claire and Raymond, remove the Umbrella's powers, bring back Lila's parents, and make himself still a billionaire in this new reality? He's never even seen Raymond, and Claire doesn't exist. How does he have the know-how to create a copy of someone who doesn't exist and someone he's never seen? He's an alien, but he's clearly never done this before. How does he know the machine needs Marigold to function? He's clearly never gotten this far into it before, so this knowledge must be based on previous users' experiences. So was there Marigold out there before he released it onto Earth? How does he know that whoever created the universe built this place? All of this is based on myths? Why wouldn't Reginald just backstab Allison? He literally has no reason to give her what she wants. I mean, he's smart enough to take away their powers in this new reality so they don't bother him, but why doesn't he just kill them outright? It's not like Allison can read the machine. He can do it without her noticing. Victor choosing to trust Allison and letting her push the button is also stupid. She's backstabbed him 3 times at this point by killing Harlan, pretending to apologize about it so that she could manipulate the team into getting here, and lying about not making a deal with Reginald. There was no logical reason for Victor to trust anything she said or did at this point. He should have blasted her. It's also extremely convenient that the moment Allison kills Reginald just so happens to be the moment he's finished all he needs to do, and all that's left is to press a simple button. Lastly, Reginald's plan was always to bring his wife on the moon back to life eventually. Why did he kill himself in season 1 and guarantee that would never happen? The obvious explanation is that he thought whatever future threat he foresaw was serious enough for him to forego his dreams of resurrecting her and instead focus on reuniting the Umbrella Academy to stop that threat. But that just brings me back to the questions I've already asked about Reginald. What is this threat he saw coming, and how did he know about it? The other explanation is that he planned to bring himself back to life somehow. But I know that's definitely not true, because if he knew how to do that, then his wife wouldn't have been dead on the moon for so long. As you can tell from the length of this segment, the 3rd season of the show was the worst so far when it came to the plot. It broke everything from characters to time to logic to a universe, and even my own sanity at some points. But I'm sure season 4 can't be worse, right? Right? Unfortunately, the Umbrella Academy ended after 3 seasons as the writers had run out of ideas for how to further the plot. However, there was a script that was never adapted that details what would have happened if a 4th season of the show ever did exist. So, we'll take a look at that and refer to this non-existent season as the Phantom Season. The premise of this season is that after the universe was reset at the end of the last season, the siblings find themselves in a new reality in which none of them have powers. Luther is no longer part of Gorilla, Claire and Raymond exist, Lila's parents are alive, Reginald is once again a famous billionaire, and his wife, Abigail Hargreaves, is now alive. The siblings spend 6 years living normal lives in this new reality before Victor's kidnapping leads them on a quest to find a plot device masquerading as a character named Jennifer. Jennifer then slowly escorts them to their next apocalypse checkpoint. Unfortunately, this time, the checkpoint does not come with a respawn. It's never explained, but I'm going to give the show the benefit of doubt and say that the siblings were all given pre-existing identities via birth certificates, IDs, and social security numbers when they popped into this new reality, and that somehow they're able to find the exact location of all those things. If they weren't given all that, well, then I guess I have to assume that they were all able to build their identities from the ground up over the course of those 6 years, to the point that they were all able to get jobs in places like the bloody CIA. Well, you see, that's the benefit of doing long, lazy time jumps. They allow you to see your characters were just able to do things or become completely different people without having to show exactly how they got to where they are right now. If anyone was curious, according to Steve Blackman, the showrunner, that shot we got at the end of the last season of Ben looking distinguished in a suit while reading a book in a train was apparently just a shot of Darth Ben when he was starting to work on the crypto scam that sent him to prison. I had really thought they'd go in a more interesting direction of that, but nope. It was just a shot of Ben being a crypto bro, I guess. This season, there happens to be a group of people known as the Keepers who believe that the reality they are currently in is a false one. They are led by 2 people known as Jean and Jean Thibodeau. These people claim to have memories of living in another timeline, with another life before this one, and the evidence that they have to back this up is the random appearance of various artifacts that are not native to this current timeline. The artifacts happen to include things like a picture of the Umbrella Academy as children, a picture of Reginald on the grassy knoll, and action figures of the Umbrella Academy. They nicknamed this phenomenon the Umbrella Effect, which is a nice nod to the Mandela Effect. Later on, the siblings manage to get their powers back when Darth Ben spikes their drinks with Marigold. I'm just going to ask all the relevant questions relating to the nonsense that happens afterwards. First of all, why does Ben make all of them drink the Marigold? He literally gains nothing from forcing this on them. Additionally, why is the hue on 5 teleports now pink instead of blue? And why is the color associated with Victor's powers now orange instead of blue? Why can Klaus levitate now without any help from ghosts, even though that was never established as one of his powers? Why do Ben's tentacles now come from the back instead of the front? Why does Aya develop lasers on top of her power copying ability? And why does Allison also develop psychokinesis, super strength, electricity fluctuation, and mind control, while everyone else just gets their powers back? Why does Luther revert to his gorilla form even though he obtained that form because of the serum he got after being injured on a mission and not because of the Marigold? Why does everyone except Klaus get sick when they get their powers back? Well, according to Steve Blackman, that's because Klaus's Marigold was poured into his body rather than ingested, and Klaus did drugs so quickly afterwards that it helped to mask the sickly effects of consuming Marigold. Okay, but what about Harlan? He consumed Marigold orally and didn't get sick, or did the Marigold go to his lungs instead of his stomach and that's why he didn't get sick? It would really be nice if these questions were answered in, the show, instead of behind-the-scenes interviews. Why doesn't Five just teleport everyone to the subway station in this scene? It's way safer than them just standing there and letting them get shot. On Tuesday, January 3rd, 1995, in Kensington Wharf, two fishermen were on the news after capturing what might have been the largest possible squid ever caught. As they talked about how it was done, a face appeared from the inside of the squid and they cut it open to reveal a plot device. When asked what happened to it, the plot device simply says, "The cleanse." And as the news reporter continued reporting, we saw Reginald in the background looking at the plot device in shock. Why did the plot device pop out of a squid? How long has the plot device been in that squid? And how did it survive for so long? Was plot device born in the squid, or was it trapped there? Why does plot device know about the cleanse even though the older version of it has no idea what that is? At one point, after capturing the plot device, Jean and Jean show it the artifacts from the other timelines and tell it about the memories that they have of a former timeline. They ask plot device how they can help it bring about the cleanse, which according to them will destroy all the false timelines and leave behind the real one. Plot device says that they are crazy and tries to call for help, but they show it their guns so it backs down. They then leave plot device in a room with the giant squid that it came out of, and it's scared of this for some reason. This isn't the Watchmen universe. Why is it scared of the giant squid? It doesn't know anything about the cleanse. So what memories are being triggered by it seeing the squid? I assume that Jean and Jean heard about the cleanse from the news report, but why do they think that situation has anything to do with restoring the proper timeline? Why do they think that's how the cleanse will work? Also, the Thibodeaux seem to think that the timeline in their memories is the real one, and the one they're currently in is the false one. And the reason they're confident of this is because they are able to find random artifacts from their memories in this new timeline, even though those artifacts have no history in this current timeline. But what about the artifacts they don't recognize at all? Or the artifacts that contradict other artifacts because they're from other timelines? Like, what if there's one news report they remember from their timeline that stated that the Umbrella Academy was a prosperous superhero team till adulthood, but another news report that claims that the Umbrella Academy died as children? Why don't they think at any point that their memories could just be one random timeline and not the true correct timeline that should exist, even though they're scientists and that would be expected of them? Lastly, why isn't plot device smart enough to figure out that if they need it for the cleanse to get back to their own timeline, then they won't shoot it obviously and try to use that to its advantage? Ben eventually finds where plot device is being kept and kills all the people protecting it at the farm because, just like commission assassins, no one in the keepers can aim and shoot for some reason. After the siblings find out what happened in the Jennifer incident, Abigail Hargreaves explains that years ago, she synthesized a new element called marigold, and at the same time, unbeknownst to her, a second particle was created called Durango.
When marigold and Durango interact, they cause a reaction. Unstoppable. The extinction of everything we know.
The cleanse.
And by the time she realized what was happening, it was too late for their world. She then says that Jennifer currently has Durango inside her, so none of the siblings should come into contact with her, otherwise they'll end the world via the cleanse. I have a million questions about this in terms of world building, but for the plot, I only have thousands. If the reason why Darth Ben is drawn to the plot device is because he made contact with it, then why was he drawing images in the third season of it before he even met it? Why was Darth Ben still obsessed with the plot device, even though he had never had a Jennifer incident at that point? Who were the people holding onto the plot device and it was in the container during the Jennifer incident, and why were they holding onto it? Was it just because it was a squid baby, or was there another reason? Also, instead of lying to them, why didn't Reginald just tell the Umbrellas on the mission that there was a kid in the container he needed them to rescue? But if they made contact with her, then they'd explode because of their powers or something. He could have just told them to rescue her without making contact with her, then erased their memories afterwards and done whatever he wanted with her. Why was Reginald already at the site of the plot device's appearance before it popped out of the squid? Did he just want to see a giant squid that was captured by the fishermen, or did he know that the squid would be carrying a child that he would need? If it's the latter, how did he know that? After Ben made contact with the plot device as a kid, why didn't Reginald just explain the situation to their siblings, isolate Ben and plot device, and then try to make Alice and rumor the both of them to forget each other so that they don't make contact anymore? Why didn't he at least try that before killing them? Would it have worked? It was never tried, so we'll never know. I know I already asked this, but it bears asking again. Why does plot device pop out of a squid in 2006 talking about the cleanse? Is that when it came into existence? Was it trapped there? Did the Durango appear over a decade before the marigold in this reset universe and infect a squid which gave birth to a girl? And does the plot device know about the cleanse? Or is that just what was on its mind for some reason? If so, then does Durango come with the memories of the cleanse or what? Last question, why didn't the original of this reset reality just kill the plot device instead of raising it in a secluded town for years? He himself said that he would have been willing to make the same choice to kill the kids that the other original made.
The other Hargreaves killed Ben and Jennifer.
And he had a perfectly valid reason for doing so.
Innocent kids
who, left to their own devices, would have set off a cataclysmic chain of events leading to the extinction of all humanity.
So he clearly has no issue with child murder. Why would he take the risk of another cleanse by keeping the plot device alive for so long? Additionally, where the heck did the jar of marigold that Abigail had even come from? She told the Umbrellas that it came from the plot device, but that was obviously a lie, so where did it actually come from? Was it another artifact of the previous timeline? If so, then how the heck did she find it? Or was it Reginald's jar that he still brought to Earth in this new reality? But why would he still have that history of bringing the jar to Earth in this reset universe, even though he didn't need or use it after he got his wife back via the reset? None of these questions will ever be answered, so I'll move on to other questions that will also never be answered. Following the revelation of the Jennifer incident, Marigold and Durango, Lila talks to Five and suggests using the multiversal train to somehow go back in time and stop the original Jennifer incident from happening by preventing Ben and plot device from touching, which Five eventually agrees to. Firstly,
You two of yours go back in time and stop the coming Armageddon. We travel back to the original Jennifer incident, stop your Ben from ever touching that Jen.
why the heck would Lila think that the train would take them back in time? Five already explained that it only goes to alternate timelines at the exact time and location of the current timeline that they are in. If they tried to go to one of these alternate realities and then go to the past, it would obviously take you to the past of that reality, which is exactly what happens when they try to do that. That was obviously going to be the outcome. Why the heck wouldn't that have been obvious to them the moment Lila suggested it? Oh, I forgot, they need to have this stupid romance, so screw the decisions making any sense. Secondly, even if the plan was viable, why would they risk going back that far and changing the timeline that significantly? The death of Ben changed their siblings' lives so massively that they have no idea how much the world would be impacted by changing an event like that. Why don't they just try to alter the most recent touching by going back a few days? That would be more plausible and safer. Thirdly, Five still doesn't have full control over his time travel abilities, so why the heck would they even think about going back decades? The last time they tried this, he scattered his siblings across 3 years. Five would never take a risk that large unless the world was literally about to end, and they're not there yet. This whole plan is stupid. Speaking of Five and risks, I find Five's non-interference in Victor and Reginald's conversation to be bizarre. Let me explain. After Reginald learns that Ben and Jennifer have already made contact, he decides the best plan of action now would be to shoot Ben not to prevent the cleanse from developing any further. Alison and Victor are disapproving of this idea, as the two of them don't want to gun down an alternate version of their sibling. When Reginald ignores them, Victor goes to the extent of threatening his life in order to make sure he gives them a chance to save Ben by stripping the marigold from his body, like Victor did with Harlan, before he has to resort to killing him. During this entire conversation, Five is dead silent, and it's after this outburst that he talks with Lyle and comes up with a stupid time travel plan. I think it's extremely out of character for Five not to jump in and be in full support of Reginald's plan. This is the person who told Victor last season that he would kill him if he ever made another decision that endangered the world, and the same person that was in support of handing over Harlan to the Sparrows so they could kill him and they could get access to the Kugel Blitz in order to stop the apocalypse. And this was before he found out about Harlan killing their mothers. Five is supposed to be the pragmatic one in the group. It is completely quiet when Reginald presents an option to kill someone that they don't even like in order to stop another apocalypse. He instead resorts to a much dumber and more dangerous plan without even considering the simple and foolproof solution that Reginald suggests. He's willing to kill a man he barely knew and his own brother to save the world, but he's just silent when presented with the opportunity to kill a rude alternative version of his dead brother that no one likes. I find that wildly out of character for him. And the reason why this is here, not in the characters video, is because it's an out-of-character moment that leads to him enacting a really stupid plan.
Sorry, I fell out of character.
At one point when talking to Darth Ben, the plot device claims that nobody came to claim it after it came out of the squid.
When I was 6, I was pulled out of the stomach of a giant squid. Nobody ever came to claim me. Must have tossed me overboard. It's a miracle I even survived.
I find this impossible to believe. Reginald was literally at the site. Why wouldn't he kidnap and keep plot device with him from the moment it fell out of the squid? He's rich and powerful and willing to kill for his own goals. Why didn't he just kill the camera crew and the people in the area with his tentacle and then kidnap the plot device and leave? Even if Reginald was only planning to grab it later, it was a girl that was caught on camera coming out of a giant squid. The local government or some health organization would immediately claim that girl the moment they saw her on the news. I don't believe her story for a single second. Why is Five suddenly able to make a perfect jump in an alternate timeline to the past and back when he only recently got his powers back after not having them for 6 years, and his last successful attempt at time travel at this point was jumping a few seconds back in time in order to save his siblings? How has he gone from struggling to jump seconds to perfectly jumping over a decade while carrying someone despite doing no further training to develop his abilities? When talking about Ben, Victor tells Reginald that he can remove Ben's marigold because he's done it before, and they have a conversation about the nature of family. Victor says that they drive him crazy, which is why he moved away from them, but when he needs them, they'll be there, and Reginald calls humans inferior because of this.
More evidence humans are an inferior species.
If that's what you think, I feel sorry for you.
Victor has no reaction whatsoever to the revelation that his dad is an alien. The writers truly do not care anymore. When the multiversal train moves past its natural stopping point, why does that happen? And why don't Five and Lila attempt to teleport out of the train the second that happens? Why doesn't Lila try to laser the train tracks to stop the train? I'm not even gonna bother asking the billion questions about how the heck one human skin suit with a completely different shape and size is able to just fit over a different one on top of a different alien physique without the entire structure looking grotesque. I'm just gonna say, that's weird. Those bullets should have gone through the van, especially in its already battered state. Also, it's really nice of the keepers to not use their common sense when attacking the umbrellas by just going around the damn van. They're really trying to one-up the commission, huh? There's a really weird error that Allison makes in this scene, and I don't know if it was the writers that forgot the plot or if I'm the one who missed something. When Victor tries to pull out the marigold from Ben, Allison of all people says,
He's pulling out the Durango!
In response to Luther asking what's happening. Why the heck would Allison say this? She's the only one of the siblings who's seen Victor do this with Harlan, and he's already explained the plan beforehand. He is trying to pull out the marigold from inside Ben's body. Why the heck would Allison think that he's pulling out the Durango? Where is that coming from? Early on, Reginald had made a deal with Victor to allow him to attempt to remove the marigold from Ben's body before he resorted to trying to kill him. During Victor's confrontation with Ben, Victor loses the ability to communicate with Reginald, hence, Reginald can no longer tell what's happening inside the building. The only person from the outside who can see what's happening in the building is a sniper that Reginald has positioned on the roof in the adjacent building that's awaiting orders from Reginald on when to shoot. After failing to receive a response several times from Victor, in fear of the cleanse spreading even further, Reginald tells the sniper to fire. Why the heck doesn't Reginald just ask the sniper for visual confirmation of what's happening if he can't get in contact with Victor, so he can know definitively whether the siblings are dead or whether he needs to give them any more time to suck out the marigold? A simple, describe to me exactly what you see happening would have helped him make a much more informed decision. When the assassination attempt fails, a fight ensues and Allison tries to rumor the cleanse, but she stupidly decides to stop when she sees Ben's face. She already knew he was in there, so why the heck would this work? Also, he's not actually her brother. He's an alternate reality version of her dead brother who's been nothing but rude to them ever since he was introduced. The last thing he did to them was insult them and forcibly give them their powers back. Him and Allison don't share some kind of brother-sister relationship, so why on earth would seeing his face all of a sudden make her hesitate? Oh, I know why. It's because the writers need to knock out Allison since she's the only one who has the power to prevent their nonsensical excuse of a plot from happening. In the middle of the fight, Lila and Victor combine their powers to try and kill the cleanse, but it doesn't work, and this is the first confirmation we get since she got her powers back that she still does have her power copying ability. If Lila's had this ability this entire time, then what the heck was the point of giving her the heat vision as an additional superpower? She only uses this power 3 times this season. First, when she discovers that she has that ability. Second, when she lasers a guy in front of Diego. And thirdly, when blowing up this gas tank to try and stop the cleanse. None of these were meaningful things in any capacity that couldn't have been achieved with any other set of powers. So why in God's good name was she given the ability this season? What was the reason for this? After they fail to stop the cleanse, Abigail reveals herself to Reginald as the one responsible for initiating the cleanse. She says,
Dying was my penance for creating something so deadly.
And asks Reginald why he released the marigold onto Earth. He says,
That was an act of love.
But she says,
Reginald, it was hubris. Your actions had consequences far greater than anything you could imagine.
He then says,
I was wrong. And you made it right.
Kill me and kill me now. None of this makes any sense. The entire universe was reset at the end of the last season. This Reginald has no memories of the other versions of himself and has a completely different history than them. The whole reason as to why the Reginald of the previous season reset the universe was to create a universe where his wife was still alive, and he was successful, meaning that this reset version of Reginald already had his wife in this reality. Why the heck is this Reginald saying that he had to release the marigold to bring his wife back to life when his wife was already in this reality thanks to the efforts of the previous Reginald? Abigail is conflating the actions of this reset Reginald with the actions of the Reginald that created the Sparrow and Umbrella Academies by releasing the marigold. This Reginald never did any of that. He didn't need to because his wife was already alive. She either never died in this reality or she did die and he managed to bring her back to life. If it's the latter, then there's no way that him bringing her back to life involved the direct use of marigold in any manner, which brings me to my next question. Why the heck is the show trying to establish that marigold was somehow able to bring Abigail back to life? What happened in the previous season was that a different Reginald was able to use the marigold inside the siblings' bodies to power a machine that enabled him to reset the universe. The reset Reginald didn't do any of that. Additionally, the original Reginald from the first season simply released the marigold on Earth, and that marigold made several women pregnant with children that developed superpowers. If Reginald's intention was always to bring back his wife, how was the original Reginald planning to do that? Did he just release the marigold after his wife died in hope that it would do something random that might be able to bring her back in the future? Or did he know that the marigold would result in a bunch of superpowered babies that he was planning to later use to power the miracle machine and reset the universe to get back his wife? But regardless of which it is, both of these scenarios require marigold just being used as a fuel source. Even if this reset Reginald's wife was dead, there's no way he could have used marigold to directly bring her back. It would have to be done through the miracle machine. The reason why I'm hammering this point home so much is because Abigail is claiming that this version of Reginald still brought Marigold back to Earth and used it to somehow bring her back to life. Since that isn't possible without resetting the entire universe, she has to be conflating his actions with the actions of the Reginalds from the previous timelines.
Whatever anger you may feel towards me is misdirected. It was the other Sir Reginald Hargreaves who committed this horrible act.
Someone's been playing putty with your hippocampus.
I assure you, I haven't the foggiest notion of what this is about. You are speculating about the actions of a completely different version of myself from a completely different timeline. I can't speak to how the other Hargreaves saw you.
And even though this Reginald should have no memories of the actions of those Reginalds, he accepts that he released Marigold to save her. The show is confused about its own mechanics. Either in this reset universe, Reginald was able to bring back his wife using the Marigold in a way that had nothing to do with getting a bunch of women pregnant in the miracle machine, even though such a thing has never been presented in the show, or this reset Reginald never did actually release the Marigold in this reality since his wife was already alive, but he somehow knows that the other versions of him did release the Marigold and is taking responsibility for the actions of another version of himself, which he already showed he would not do when confronted about the events of the Jennifer incident by the Umbrellas. Neither of these options make any sense. Speaking of not making any sense, why does Abigail want to punish the entire planet for the actions of her husband? She says dying was her penance for creating something so deadly and that Reginald's actions had consequences greater than he could have imagined. What consequences is she talking about? Another Reginald reset the universe in his image, and there was no Marigold and no cleanse until she initiated it. Everything was fine for him, her, the world, and the siblings until she decided to bring back Marigold to the siblings. Speaking of which, where the heck did she get this Marigold? Did she just make it again? Or is this the Marigold that reset Reginald brought to Earth for some reason? Also, if Abigail wanted to kill her husband and punish herself for creating Marigold, why didn't she just commit murder-suicide like a normal couple?
Suicide is badass!
What does she get from the end of the world? Does she know about the crisis on Infinite Earths that's been happening thanks to the existence of the Umbrellas, and that's what she's referring to when she talks about greater consequences? And if so, then how?
I was wrong. And you made it right.
Why the heck does Reginald agree with what she says and let himself die? Why does he suddenly come to accept this as punishment for his hubris? The man is hubris incarnate. Why would a man as old and stubborn as him just allow himself to die without needing any further explanation as to what his wife means when she talks about
consequences far greater than anything you could imagine?
What does he mean when he says,
I was wrong. And you made it right.
It was the other versions of him that tried to manipulate events not to bring Abigail back to life, and they were eventually successful. He was able to live a fulfilling life in a new reality with no problems for at least 6 years to our knowledge. Everything was going his way until Abigail decided to reintroduce Marigold to the siblings. What exactly was he wrong about, and how the heck did she make it right? Yeah, an alternate Reginald releasing Marigold and resetting the universe to bring his wife back to life is definitely an act of hubris, but Reginald has never cared about that. He was willing to do it. Why the heck is he suddenly having a change of heart at the moment of his death, even though everything wrong that's happened so far is because of his wife messing with his current reality? If Abigail wanted to initiate the cleanse, why didn't she just take the raw Marigold she had, go to where the plot device was being held by Reginald, kill one of the town's residents and wear them as a skin suit, and then make the plot device drink the Marigold by spiking one of her drinks with it? Why does the Marigold need to be inside someone for it to start the cleanse when it comes in contact with the Durango? Why is the cleanse a force that destroys alternate timelines in order to maintain a single timeline, something that requires the physical interaction of two bodies containing Marigold and Durango, instead of something that just requires the two raw elements to come into contact? In the finale, the show finally stops pretending that there's ever been a single timeline, and instead they choose to bombard you with multiversal nonsense. 5 finds the Council of Reeds. The Council of Worlds. The Council of Ricks. The Council of Kangs. The Council of Fives in the deli at the subway, and they explain how the timeline works. Apparently, all these fives are alternate versions of each other from different subway timelines who have given up on trying to save their universes because they figured out the problem is actually them and their siblings. Supposedly, the siblings shattered the original timeline, which is why one of the fives came up with a commission to try and maintain a single timeline. But apparently, every time a single timeline is formed, Once the siblings come into existence, it shatters into a million other timelines. So they try to do the single timeline again in an infinite loop, but it never works. According to one of the fives, they have tried to make it work 145,412 times, but they have failed each time. The family is seemingly doomed to save and destroy the world over and over again ad infinitum. Our 5 then relays this information to his family and convinces them that they have to allow the cleanse to consume them so that them, all the marigold inside their bodies, and the alternate timeline can be destroyed, leaving behind a single timeline in which the siblings never existed. After having some arguments, Lila puts Claire and her family on the multiversal train in an effort to save them, and the siblings then allow themselves to be consumed by the cleanse. Claire and Lila's family are able to be saved, and a bunch of characters that were introduced over the course of the show seem to be alive and happy. The Umbrellas, however, are dead and forgotten. Kill me, and kill me now. Why, though? What's so special about the Umbrellas that caused the single timeline to shatter into a million timelines whenever they come into existence? It's obviously not the marigold, because the marigold isn't unique to the Umbrella family.
On the 12th hour.
There's 35 of the siblings that were never accounted for that were also infected with the marigold, but the Coffee 5 doesn't mention them. He specifically says it's their family that causes the shatter.
What shattered the original timeline?
We did.
By we, he means the family, my siblings? The morons, yeah. One perfect timeline, and the moment we come into existence, boom, shattered to an infinite number of alternate timelines and an infinite loop of time.
What unique qualities does 5 and his family possess that causes them to break the timeline? Even if it's the marigold that's the problem, why can't Victor just strip all the siblings of the marigold inside them so that he's the only one that has to die in order to restore the proper timeline, and the rest of them can just escape via the train to the proper timeline? That actually might have been a decent way to end his story. The person who has killed billions of people with their power now using that power to make the ultimate sacrifice that will rectify the proper timeline. It might have been neat, who knows? Needless to say, Claire and Alice's kids surviving by using the train to transport them to the proper timeline makes no sense whatsoever. 5 clarifies the siblings won't just be dead after they're taken by the cleanse, it'll be as if they never existed.
We need to let the marigold in our bodies merge with the Durango inside the cleanse.
You okay? And then what happens to us?
We cease to exist. It's not killing ourselves, it's worse than that. We'll be erased from history.
What about the other timelines?
They will never have existed. None of us will. No one will have any memory of this. Or us.
How is it possible for Allison and Lila's children to still exist in the proper timeline as the byproduct of people who never existed? One season ago, they said something like this would create a grandfather paradox that would lead to a flippin' Kugel Blitz. But screw continuity, I guess. Why are all these versions of 5 trapped in their childhood bodies? You tell me that despite all being from different timelines, they all went through events that led to them being trapped in a kid's body. Also, how are none of these 5s experiencing paradox psychosis despite them all being different versions of the same person confined within the same location?
You're not supposed to exist in close proximity to yourself in the same timeline. These side effects can be disastrous.
The siblings are not always doomed to shatter the timeline by their own existence, and as evidenced by the show itself. In the current Reset universe, the reason why the world is ending is because Abigail Hargreaves supplied the siblings with marigold, and the siblings made contact with Durango. If I've just went back in time and stopped Abigail before she brought them the marigold, or killed Ben, or a plot device right after they made contact, or let Victor strip them of the marigold so that he was the only one that had to die, then the remaining siblings would be alive and able to go on with their lives easy peasy. Another thing I don't understand is, why is it the siblings themselves, not the marigold inside their bodies, that causes the timeline to shatter? Coffee 5 says that the universe shatters the moment they come into existence, and the way they come into existence is by Reginald releasing marigold that infects women who then give birth to them. If the timeline shatters the moment they come into existence and not the moment that Abigail creates marigold, that indicates that the timeline has a problem with either the Umbrellas as human beings or with the combination of the Umbrellas and the marigold. If it's the former, then once again, what's so special about the Umbrellas that causes this? And if it's the latter, then why not just use the solution of stripping the marigold from them by using Victor or going back in time to make sure they never consume it? R5 says to the siblings that they have to let all the marigold inside their bodies get destroyed by allowing themselves to be cleansed. But if the solution to destroying the proper timeline and getting rid of the alternate timelines this entire time has just been to let the marigold inside their bodies get in contact with the Durango in someone else's body and allow that to spread across the multiverse, how has this not happened yet in any of the other timelines? The timeline shatters by the siblings coming into existence. The siblings come into existence by getting infected with marigold, and the existence of marigold implies the existence of Durango, because according to Abigail Hargreaves, Durango is created the moment marigold is created.
Years ago, I synthesized a new element.
The particle we know is marigold.
And at the same moment, unbeknownst to me, a second particle was created, Durango.
If that's the case, then are you seriously telling me that in 145,412 alternate timelines, as well as the infinite number of alternate other timelines, up until this point, there has never been a cleanse that has successfully consumed the siblings and spread across the entire multiverse, despite the existence of Durango in all of those universes that they exist in? Additionally, if all the marigold in the reset universe has to be destroyed by the cleanse while it's inside the siblings' bodies, then what about the marigold that was in Klaus's drink that he poured out? Why does that marigold not need to be inside the siblings' bodies for it to be destroyed? Does it just evaporate into the atmosphere after a while? There are so many other questions relating to the Council of Fives, the Commission, the time travel mechanics, and even the powers of the siblings, but I'll leave those questions for the world building video. For now, that's all the problems I had with the plot of this show. Unlike most of the characters, the plot of this show was pretty bad from the first season. The Commission is a bastion of ineptitude, which makes it really hard to take any of the assassins as a serious threat. Most of the time travel is extremely confusing, inconsistent, not well thought out, lazily explained, and even contradictory to what was previously established in some cases. And some of the decisions the characters make and the decisions they choose not to make cause them to behave out of character, which is really annoying. Broadly speaking, I also wasn't a fan of the show's over-reliance on the apocalypse as the ultimate threat in each season. I know it's supposed to tie into the whole theme of the Umbrellas coming together as a family to face a threat, but I personally think that there are way more interesting things that could have been explored further instead of constantly relapsing to the apocalypse. Reginald and Abigail's history as aliens, fleshing out the sparrows and the alternate reality they lived in, looping around to 5 becoming the founder, having a whole season focused on what happened to the unaccounted 35 Marigold children, having an arc centered on the Umbrella Academy as children. Considering the child actors portrayed the characters quite well, it would have been nice to see a lot more of them. These are all things that could have been explored in addition to or in place of having a repetitive cycle of apocalypses. One of the biggest challenges I had with this video was finding a coherent way to lay out a series of extremely convoluted problems that arise thanks to the characters giving the most absurd explanation to various events. Trying to distinguish between which explanation broke the world and which one broke the narrative was also particularly difficult, especially in the 4th season, and I'm sure there's some crossover with some of my explanations, but I tried my best to separate the two and mainly focus on the narrative for this video. I also hope the visuals I provided for the time travel logic helped in your understanding of the problems I presented. There were a myriad of questions left unanswered by the end of this show, so there's probably a couple of things I forgot to account for in this video, but I did attempt to highlight as many of them as I could. If there's a question you feel relates to the narrative that I haven't brought up in this video, then you can check out my other 2 videos on the characters and the world building, because there's a chance I brought it up there for one reason or another. For now, I'd like to take a look at what Steve Blackman had to say in an interview about some of the unanswered questions regarding the story that he left the audience to figure out. When asked, "Why did you wait until this final season to explain how Ben died in the Jennifer incident? Was there any other version where they could just live happily ever after and the cleanse didn't happen?" Blackman responded by saying, "No. The Jennifer incident was such a big thing in the graphic novel, and every year we pleaded how the kids felt this tremendous guilt, but they never discussed it, and they didn't realize that they were brainwashed to feel like they were responsible and never to discuss it. So the fans definitely wanted to know what the Jennifer incident is. To be honest with you, Gerard and Gabriel Barr, who's an illustrator for the comics, don't know what the Jennifer incident is. This is my interpretation of it. They're going to do something slightly different in the graphic novel, but they were very gracious and said, 'Go do your thing, and we're going to do our thing. Our graphic novel will continue past the show.' I just thought it was a very important thing to end. It was one of the biggest mysteries of the show. Fans of the graphic novel especially wanted to know, but also the fans of the show wanted to know what happened to Ben. We all know Ben died, so I thought it was important to explain it. So yeah, if you need any more evidence to confirm that the Jennifer incident was never planned out ahead of time, then there you go." The interview also asked Blackman to explain how and why the original timeline broke, and why Abigail Hargreaves feels it's like it's her responsibility to set it straight. To this, Blackman said, "The real idea was she created a God particle in her mind, and she didn't realize that when she created the God particle, she created an anti-God particle, and it was too late to save her world." Kill me. So she somehow created Marigold in her mind. How? Is she a god? And that created Durango somewhere else for some reason that will never be explained? Whatever happened with Marigold and Durango in her world killed everyone. What the heck do you mean whatever happened? You came up with the bloody story. You should be the one telling us what happened. Did the 2 elements somehow combine, or did they infect people and start another cleanse? Abigail said the reaction between the 2 elements is unstoppable. So did it stop at their home planet, or did it just keep spreading into the cosmos? Anyone who could get away escaped. You just said that whatever happened on their planet killed everyone. So did it kill everyone, or did some people escape? She died from it. From what? The thing that you never clarified that killed the people of her planet? Her body is still intact at the moment of her death, and you're saying that whatever killed her also killed her species. Does the reaction of the Marigold and the Durango only cause death of her species via dying in your sleep, or did the death of her species have nothing to do with the Marigold and Durango interacting, and it was caused by factors surrounding those 2 elements? Hargreaves was heartbroken, couldn't bear to see her die, so he took her with him, but he knew that Marigold was special, and he thought Marigold was powerful enough to release. He had a plan that Marigold would eventually come to his aid, and it ended up being the essence of these immaculate conceptions of 43 women who were touched with marigold on Earth and had these children, which he collected and kept 7 of. So, I was right? You're telling me that Reginald released an element that caused the near extinction of his entire species onto another planet with no idea what that would do, in the hopes that this would somehow lead to him finding a way to revive his dead wife. Kill me, and kill me now! And Blackman has the guts to call that a plan? A prayer has more planning than this. That was just a reckless, haphazard, uncalculated shot in the dark. To call this half-baked would be generous. This didn't even enter the oven. This is the inciting incident of your entire show, and it's based on guesswork. Why would you say this? So there was a plan afoot from him in the very beginning. No, there wasn't, Blackman. Stop lying to me. To have these extra fighting units, extra powerful people to help him in his crusade to get back his wife. I don't think he could control it in the way he thought. And clearly, he couldn't control his kids. But he did release that marigold in the hope that it would bring about these special children. He just didn't realize that Durango would come along with it. Kill me, and kill me now. Once again, Reginald just released marigold on Earth with no clue what the effects would be on humans. And when the result of that was a bunch of superpowered babies, he decided that he would get as many of those kids as possible and try to use them to eventually bring back his wife. But he was also okay with just letting the mothers of these children, as well as the remaining 36 children with powers, live their lives without any care as to what the effects of marigold would be on their bodies in the future, or whether the other 36 children might develop a power in the future that might help him bring his wife back to life. If the goal was to use their powers, then why did Reginald never ask Klaus to commune with his wife at any point? Would that even work given she's an alien? Who knows? Also, if Reginald's ultimate goal was to use the kids to bring back his wife, then why the heck would he treat them so badly and never change his behavior towards them, even when he saw them starting to slowly move out of the house? Why wouldn't he just pretend to like them so they would grow attached to him and fight to win his approval? And then he could have manipulated them to do whatever he wanted. Alternatively, why didn't he just alter their memories every time they thought about leaving him so they would always be subservient to him? It just seems like he had no concern over driving away the people that Blackman claims he wanted to use to bring back his wife. Lastly, Blackman said that Marigold and Durango are what caused the near extinction of Reginald's species. And in the Phantom season, when Abigail explains her creation of Marigold and Durango, Reginald isn't shocked by this information. He clearly knew that the creation of Marigold would also lead to the creation of Durango, because it already happened on his home planet. So how can you then say that he didn't know that releasing Marigold on Earth would cause Durango to appear like it did on his home planet? None of this makes any sense, which is actually a consistent theme at this point. The interview continues saying, and that's why Abigail feels like it's her job to fix, because she unleashed it, to which Blackman says, right. So she feels that she did the ultimate sin and said to him that she felt he had no right to bring her back. She didn't ask to be brought back. She believed she should have died for her sin. The original timeline broke because there was never supposed to be Marigold on Earth. And when the Marigold made its way from Hargreaves' home planet along with him to Earth, when it impregnated these women and they had these special children, that began the shattering of the timeline. First of all, why did the timeline shatter because the Marigold was on Earth? Why didn't it shatter the moment the element was created? What the heck is so special about Earth in particular in a universe with advanced alien life that causes the timeline to shatter? Also, make up your mind. Did the timeline shatter because the Marigold made its way onto Earth, or did it shatter because the special children were born? You've said both. Which one is it? So from the moment Marigold was released and these children were born, it can't be both. The beginning of the timeline shattering can't happen twice, you dingus. The timelines start to shatter and we became millions of alternate timelines, and the only way to put them back together was for them to cease to exist. The next question Blackman was asked was, what exactly happened to Hargreaves and Abigail's home planet? To which he says, gone, destroyed. It doesn't exist anymore. Very few people survived. Hargreaves and a few other people got away and Abigail was saved. But everyone else suffered from the cleanse disease, and the cleanse did exactly what it did to Earth on that planet. Because Marigold and Durango together created the cleanse monster, the same kind of thing, and the whole planet was consumed faster than ours. Abigail was at fault, because she created Marigold, which she thought was powerful, not realizing she unleashed the anti of it at the same time. She was a wonderful scientist and probably smarter than Hargreaves. First of all, being smarter than the guy who released an extinction-causing element onto another planet with a shot in the dark to bring back his dead wife isn't the flex you think it is, Blackman. Secondly, where did all these other aliens go? Did they all just leave their planet without ever communicating with each other and decide to scatter with no common relocation place in mind? I find that difficult to believe for an advanced alien civilization, but alright. Thirdly, you're saying that the same cleanse that happened on Earth is what happened on Reginald's home planet, and that's what caused a lot of them to die, and that's the same thing that killed Abigail. But the cleanse on Earth vanishes anybody with Marigold out of existence, so why the heck does it just cause a deadly disease with the original species that somehow keeps the body intact but also destroys the entire planet? Also, why did Abigail create Marigold? She was a scientist. What is supposed to be the purpose of this element? Next question was, does Klaus ever find out what happened to Ben since he wasn't there when the memories got restored? Blackman says, we don't show it, but I assume that somewhere along that van ride, on the way there, someone says, what happened to Ben? And Klaus says, yeah, what happened to Ben? And they say, well, alright, he killed him. He erased our memory. I think that conversation happens off screen. The fans will ask that question. Yup. Klaus having the realization that the closest person in his entire life was murdered by the person who turned him into a drug addict and helped him develop his powers before betraying him is off screen. Klaus realizing that he'll never be able to get revenge for that act or give his brother closure on the manner of his death as a possible form of atonement for the guilt he once felt for making him stay around for so long. All that happens off screen because who the heck would want to see Klaus's reaction to that piece of completely meaningless information, right? This man is gonna kill me with his answers. The next question was, how are Allison's daughter, Claire, and Lila, and Diego's kids still alive if their parents technically don't exist? Blackman responds by saying, so it's a question of how you deal with understanding time. Don't even start talking to me about your understanding of time, Blackman. Based on your show, your understanding of time seems to boil down to, time does whatever I want it to do, and whatever I don't want it to do, whenever I want it to do anything. I think physicists will argue all different versions of time. Yes, but they'll all agree that your version is one of the dumbest. The writers in the room and I have argued about this time over and over. Oh, we can tell. Your arguments with each other bled into the script and created a bunch of convoluted contradictions that you didn't care to resolve. We're saying that because of the special portal, the subway station, they were able to be put into this timeline in a way that no one else could be. I believe they have memories of their parents, that they're the only ones who really remember that their parents existed, that no one else ever knew of the Umbrella Academy or their existence, but they do. They still share these wonderful memories in their heart and their minds about their parents and their uncles. All that is garbage and makes no sense. A special portal doesn't erase the fact that the person who made you never existed and the children's existence actively contradicts the entire premise of the third season. The next question has less to do with the plot and more so is just for people who might have been curious about this. Blackman is asked, does 5 have a name? And is it Max, like the name of the deli we see at the end of the season? To which he says, no, 5's name is 5. What we came up with was that. And I think this also has to do with Gerard Way telling me this. As the kids grew up, they got to pick their names and Grace helped pick their names. 5 could never pick one. He just was that kind of stubborn kid, and when he was 11, he disappeared and got lost in the future. It's nice to know that the showrunner doesn't remember his own show. 5 disappeared when he was 13, not 11, but okay. So he never got back to be able to have a name, so he just kept 5. So 5's name is only 5. There's no other name for 5. I will say that's something that I do quite like. The next question is one of the more obvious ones. Why is Christopher a cube? To which Blackman says, now, that is a very, very hard question. One that I don't know if I can answer. In the alternate timeline, there was a way to develop a life form that was Christopher. We had a backstory that never made it in, that Christopher was once one of the siblings with powers, and his powers went out of control and it trapped him within this cube. That never made it into the series, but that was the sort of backstory for him. He was a family member. He was a sibling trapped in his cube that they could only hear through telekinesis. I think he means telepathy, because how the heck would you communicate via telekinesis? That he could use to communicate with people, and he was a very rude, foul-mouthed guy. I guess that's the answer to anyone that was curious about that. The final question for Blackman from this interview was, if Luther was watching over Abigail on the moon, why didn't Reginald ever have Klaus communicate with her? Blackman says, she was in stasis, right? No, she was dead. And not technically dead. Nope, she was technically dead. It's more like a cryogenic thing. No, it wasn't. She was in a cryogenic pod, yes, but you yourself have said in this very interview that she died, and we saw that cryogenic container that she was in. It said, Abigail Hargreaves, deceased. She dies, but she was kept on the verge of death. Does this guy think before saying things? Of course he doesn't. That's how we ended up with season 4. There's no such thing as being dead and being on the verge of death. At the same time, you're either dead or on the verge. One or the other, not both. She died from the disease that wiped out their planet, but I think he kept her on the cusp of death. Just stop, man, just stop. You only trusted Luther because Luther's a bit of a simpleton, and honest, that's just not true at all. Reginald clearly asked Luther to do this because he knew Luther was loyal to him. That was before you turned him into a brain-dead human with an IQ to match his body. He wasn't always a simpleton. You turned him into that, and I hate it. And would do exactly what he said, which was to watch the moon. Luther never knew that he was actually protecting the thing that was most important to Hargreaves, his wife, who he loved. Yup, and I never knew that reading this interview would somehow make me hate this show even more. But like I said in my previous video, you can thank the black man himself for giving you someone you can point at the next time you ask yourself why the Umbrella Academy got worse with each passing season. Because when Steve Blackman was asked how he hopes the fans will feel in the finale, he said, I would love for them to still love the family and not feel let down that we ended it the way we did, because no one forced me to end it that way. I felt this was the right ending, and I hope the fans will agree with me that this makes sense in the whole scope of the show, that this had to be the ending. They make the ultimate sacrifice to save everybody, and that really is a superhero thing. This is my second video in this series covering the Umbrella Academy. Thanks for watching. You can check out the other parts of this series if you want to hear my thoughts on some of the other aspects of the show that weren't covered here. Please like and subscribe if you can, if you want to help out my channel, and sorry for any bad audio or editing. Sorry for any bad audio or any editing mistakes I might have made, but this is all I can currently manage, unfortunately. Thanks for listening this long, and well, bye.